Most people think success is all about working harder, getting smarter, or knowing the right people. But there's something even more important that most overlook: learning how to handle your own emotions. If you can't stay calm when things go wrong, if you're always reacting instead of responding, or if you carry stress and anger from one situation to the next, success becomes much harder to reach. Emotional intelligence isn't just about staying positive. It's about knowing how to deal with frustration, fear, disappointment, and pressure in real time. In this video, we're going to talk about what it really means to manage your emotions and how doing that every single day can lead to real, lasting success. Not just the kind of success others see, but the kind you feel deep down: more peace of mind, better decisions, stronger relationships, and a sense of confidence that doesn't fall apart when life gets tough. You're going to hear ideas that challenge how you've been thinking. You'll learn simple actions that help you feel more in control, less overwhelmed, and more clear-headed, even when everything around you feels uncertain. If you've ever wondered why you keep repeating emotional patterns, or why you feel stuck even when you're trying your best, this is going to open your eyes. Stick around, because by the end of this video, you won't just understand emotional intelligence, you'll be ready to live it. Chapter 1. Master your thoughts. To take control of emotions. Most people spend their lives reacting to whatever the day throws at them. They wake up, check their phones, get pulled into notifications, emails, frustrations, and distractions. From the very first hour of their morning, their emotions are no longer in their own hands. They are being shaped by external events, by other people's words, by moments that weren't even created by them. This is where emotional chaos begins, when your thoughts are no longer yours to manage. If you want to control your emotions, you must first learn to master your thoughts. Your thoughts are the command center. Every emotion you feel, whether it's anger, anxiety, peace, or joy, starts with a thought, not an accident, not an event, a thought. And thoughts can be chosen. That's the power too many people forget they have. The power to think with clarity, intention, and strength. You can't expect to control your emotional life while letting your thoughts run wild and untrained. Your brain is powerful, but if you don't take charge of it, it will repeat whatever patterns it has learned over the years. If you've spent years reacting in fear, it will keep doing that. If you've spent years doubting yourself, your mind will keep repeating those scripts. But if you start practicing control at the level of thought, you begin to shift everything. Mastering your thoughts begins with awareness. You must catch the thoughts that are shaping your emotions, especially the quiet ones that live just beneath the surface. These thoughts sound like "I'm not good enough," "no one cares what I think," or "this always happens to me." They often don't shout, but they guide how you feel. If you start your day with the thought that something will go wrong, even if nothing does, your body will feel on edge. You'll be waiting for disaster. That one thought will twist the entire day into anxiety. When you become the observer of your thoughts, you stop being a slave to them. You begin to notice, pause, and ask, is this thought useful? Is it even true? What emotion is this thought creating in me? You may find that most of your frustration, fear, and insecurity comes from thoughts you've never examined. They just appeared, and you let them grow roots. Now it's time to pull them out and replant new ones, thoughts that help you feel calm, strong, and steady. One of the most powerful ways to take control of your thoughts is through inner dialogue. What you say to yourself all day long becomes the environment your emotions live in. If your inner voice is filled with pressure, judgment, or panic, your emotions will reflect that. But if you speak to yourself with discipline and kindness, your emotions will follow that too. This isn't about lying to yourself or pretending things are perfect. It's about choosing the most useful and empowering thought in every situation. Instead of "I can't do this," try "This is hard, but I can handle it." Instead of "Everything is falling apart," try "I'm doing my best through a difficult time." These aren't magic words, they're mental tools. They shift your perspective and restore emotional balance. Your thoughts also influence how long you stay stuck in negative emotions. You might feel anger or sadness. That's normal. But the thoughts you repeat will either extend the pain or help you move through it. If you keep thinking, "They shouldn't have done that to me," you stay in resentment. But if you shift to "I can't control them, but I can control me," you start to let go. Mastery over thoughts doesn't stop you from feeling, it allows you to feel without being controlled by the feeling. Another essential practice is slowing down your thinking. Many emotional spirals are triggered by fast, scattered thoughts. You start thinking about one problem, then another, and before you know it, you're emotionally overwhelmed. To master your emotions, you must slow your mental pace. Focus on one thought at a time. Ask yourself what truly matters right now. What is within my control at this moment? When you center yourself this way, emotions begin to settle. Clarity returns. Mental mastery also involves challenging assumptions. Your brain likes to jump to conclusions. Someone doesn't respond to your message. You assume they're upset. You make a small mistake. You assume you're a failure. These assumptions are thoughts, and they lead straight to destructive emotions. But when you stop and question them, you regain your power. You ask, "Do I have the full story? What else could this mean? What would I tell someone else in this situation?" This kind of thinking leads to emotional strength. A powerful technique to strengthen this skill is journaling. Not for the sake of keeping a record, but to face your thoughts on paper. When you write what you're thinking and how it makes you feel, you create distance. You can see the pattern more clearly. You'll often realize how one toxic thought keeps showing up in different disguises. You may also discover positive thoughts that help you handle challenges better. Writing makes your mental life visible, and what becomes visible can be improved. Another key to mastering your thoughts is being intentional with what you feed your mind. Every piece of content you consume, every conversation you entertain, every voice you listen to has the power to shape your thinking. If your environment is full of negativity, drama, and distraction, your thoughts will reflect that. You can't build a strong mind on weak input. Start protecting your mental space like it's your most valuable asset, because it is. Choose content that sharpens your mind, not numbs it. Read books that challenge you to think deeper. Listen to voices that teach calmness and responsibility. Surround yourself with people who are not only emotionally aware but also committed to growth. This isn't about perfection, it's about influence. Your thoughts are influenced by the energy around you, so be deliberate about where you spend your mental energy. Discipline is another part of thought mastery. Most people want emotional control without mental discipline, and that doesn't work. You must decide what kind of thinker you want to be. Do you want to think in a way that lifts you or one that holds you down? It's a daily decision. Every moment is an opportunity to direct your thoughts toward what strengthens you. And this takes effort, repeated, quiet, determined effort. Discipline looks like stopping a negative spiral mid-sentence and saying, "No, I'm not going there." It looks like replacing a self-defeating thought with a constructive one. It looks like waking up and setting the tone for your thoughts before the world has a chance to shape them. This is mastery, not grand gestures, just consistent, intentional thinking. Your emotions will always respond to the quality of your thoughts. If you think with intention, you feel with clarity. If you think in confusion, you feel in chaos. There is a direct line between your mental environment and your emotional world. When you take responsibility for what you allow into your mind, you take ownership of how you feel. You stop blaming the day, the news, the world, or other people. You realize that how you feel is not only your right, but your responsibility. This kind of emotional self-control leads to better decisions, stronger relationships, and deeper resilience. When you're in charge of your thoughts, you don't react to life, you respond. You don't panic at every difficulty, you pause, assess, and move with purpose. You don't let small things ruin your peace, because your peace isn't built on circumstances, it's built on mental strength. This change doesn't happen overnight. It happens through small daily practices. It happens when you wake up and take 5 minutes to ask yourself what kind of person you want to be today. It happens when you notice a negative thought and replace it with something more useful. It happens when you stop running from your feelings and start listening to the thoughts behind them. These are the moments that build strength. Quiet moments, repeated moments, life-changing moments. If you want to succeed in life, not just externally, but internally, this is where you begin, with your thoughts. Because everything flows from here: your mood, your choices, your behavior, your confidence, your peace. You don't need more motivation or another goal. You need to train your mind to work for you, not against you. This is not about controlling every emotion, it's about giving your emotions the right foundation to stand on. Start by watching your thoughts without judging them. Then choose your thoughts with more care. Speak to yourself with honesty and encouragement. Feed your mind with what builds you, not what breaks you. Protect your inner world with the same seriousness you would protect your home. This is how you begin to lead yourself. Real control doesn't come from forcing your emotions to disappear. It comes from building a strong and stable mental framework that helps your emotions make sense. And when your thoughts are rooted in strength, your emotions will follow. Mastering your thoughts is not something you do once. It's something you do every single day. It's the foundation of every success, every relationship, every breakthrough. Because the mind you build is the life you create, and you have the power to build a better one, starting now. Chapter 2. Build daily awareness to understand how you feel. Most people move through the day without ever stopping to notice what they're feeling or why. They go from one task to another, shifting moods as things happen, without realizing that their emotional state is quietly influencing every choice they make. You can't change what you don't understand, and if you don't understand what you're feeling, you'll keep living on autopilot, reacting, overthinking, and carrying tension without knowing where it comes from. Daily awareness is not just about being mindful for a moment. It's about living with the kind of attention that allows you to see your inner world clearly. This is where growth begins. Awareness means catching the moment when frustration begins, before it turns into snapping at someone. It means noticing when your body feels tense, so you can ask yourself what thought or situation caused it. It means hearing the silent voice inside that says, "I'm overwhelmed," instead of pushing through until you burn out. This kind of awareness doesn't take hours. It takes a quiet commitment to pay attention. Not once a week, not just when things go wrong. Every single day. When you wake up, before reaching for your phone, pause. Notice how your body feels. Notice what thoughts show up first. Are you anxious about the day? Are you already replaying yesterday's worries? These first few moments are important because they often set the emotional tone for the rest of the day. Becoming aware of what's already living in your mind allows you to approach the day with honesty and intention. You stop dragging emotions around that you don't recognize. You start leading yourself with clarity. Many people believe they're aware, but they're only reacting. They know they're angry, but they don't know what's under it. They know they're tired, but they don't question why. Awareness requires that you look beneath the surface. not to overanalyze, but to understand. Emotional clarity comes from asking simple, honest questions. What am I feeling right now? Where in my body do I feel it? What triggered this? What do I need right now? These questions don't just reveal feelings, they teach you how to handle them without judgment. Daily emotional awareness strengthens your ability to respond instead of react. When you're aware, you notice when your thoughts start spinning. You notice when your tone becomes short. You notice when your energy drops. And in noticing, you give yourself a chance to redirect before things spiral. This is where emotional intelligence is built. Not in the big moments, but in these small repeated check-ins with yourself. Your habit of checking inward, not just looking outward for answers or validation. It's important to understand that emotions are signals. They're not weaknesses, and they're not random. They are information. They tell you when something matters, when something hurts, when something is off. Most people try to ignore uncomfortable emotions, hoping they'll go away. But avoidance only buries them deeper. Awareness doesn't make the emotion disappear. It gives it a place to be understood. And once it's understood, it becomes easier to manage. You don't need to be emotionally perfect. You need to be emotionally honest. That begins with slowing down just enough to hear yourself clearly. One of the best ways to do this is by using brief check-in points throughout your day. In the morning, in the middle of the day, and before you go to sleep. Ask yourself, what am I feeling right now? You can even rate your emotional energy on a scale from 1 to 10. This keeps you connected to yourself in real time instead of waking up days later, realizing you've been stuck in a bad mood you never addressed. Sometimes awareness means noticing that you're not okay and accepting it without trying to fix it immediately. Growth doesn't always come from action. Sometimes it comes from simply witnessing your emotions without panic or resistance. That stillness gives you a chance to process instead of pretending. It helps you meet yourself where you are instead of trying to force yourself to be somewhere else emotionally. That's where self-respect grows, from seeing your feelings as valid and worthy of attention. Another way to build daily awareness is to name your emotions with specific words. Instead of saying, I feel bad, say I feel disappointed, or I feel lonely, or I feel embarrassed. The more specific your language, the clearer your understanding, and the clearer your understanding, the more you can take responsibility for how you respond. This emotional vocabulary is not just about being expressive, it's about gaining control. When you can name it, you can face it. When you face it, you can move forward with intention. You can also build awareness by noticing how your emotions show up in your body. Every feeling lives somewhere in you physically. Tight shoulders, a heavy chest, a racing heart, a knot in your stomach. These are not random. Your body is often more honest than your thoughts. Learn to read it. Ask what message it's sending you. Is it trying to tell you you're overwhelmed, unsafe, in need of rest? Awareness means honoring those signals instead of numbing them or pushing them aside. Real awareness requires that you stop living in distraction. You can't know how you feel if your mind is always somewhere else. If you fill every quiet moment with scrolling noise or multitasking, you will never hear what your emotions are trying to say. You don't need to meditate for hours to build awareness. You need to create small spaces of silence where your emotions are allowed to exist. Turn off the noise, sit with yourself, let your mind breathe. That space is where self-understanding begins. Awareness also helps you notice the emotional habits that run your life. You may realize that you often respond to stress with anger or silence. You may see that you avoid conflict because of fear. These patterns don't define you. They simply show you where growth is needed. Awareness makes the unconscious visible, And what becomes visible can be changed. You stop saying that's just how I am, and start saying that's what I've been doing and I'm ready to do better. Building daily awareness will also change how you treat others. When you're aware of your emotional state, you stop projecting it onto the people around you. You don't lash out just because you're having a bad day. You don't shut down because you're scared. You understand that your emotions are yours to manage, not other people's to carry. This creates stronger, healthier relationships. It makes you easier to trust, because people sense when someone is emotionally grounded. The truth is, most emotional damage happens not because we feel too much, but because we avoid feeling at all. We bury things, we deny things, we pretend to be fine when we're not. Daily awareness brings you out of denial. It helps you live with honesty. It gives you the strength to admit, this is what I'm feeling right now, without shame. That's not weakness. That's maturity. You can build this habit with simple daily actions. Start your morning by writing down 3 words that describe your current emotional state. Take a 2-minute pause at lunch to sit with your breath and ask yourself how you feel. End your day by reviewing your emotional highs and lows without judgment. These small moments create a strong emotional foundation over time. They don't take effort forever. They become part of who you are. The more you practice daily awareness, the less you will feel out of control. You will begin to see emotional waves before they crash. You will notice patterns before they repeat. You will stop blaming the outside world for how you feel, because you've built the ability to see inside yourself with clarity. That clarity is freedom. It gives you the space to choose your response. It keeps you steady when life gets loud. It helps you live in alignment with who you are, not just who you're expected to be. Daily awareness is not about being emotionally fragile. It's about being emotionally responsible. It's about learning to live with your whole self, not just the part that shows up to work or smiles in public. You are not just what you do. You are what you feel. And when you honor that truth with daily attention, you begin to unlock your full potential, not just for success, but for peace, for power, and for presence. This is not a task to check off. This is a way of living. It's the daily decision to slow down and notice, to see yourself clearly, to stay present in your own life instead of drifting through it. And in doing so, you begin to understand yourself in a way that no one can take from you. That understanding becomes strength. That strength becomes wisdom. And that wisdom is the foundation of every lasting change you will ever make. Chapter 3. Identify emotional triggers to prevent negative reactions. There are moments when you feel a sudden rush of anger, shame, or defensiveness, and you can't fully explain why. It happens quickly, often in response to a word, a glance, a tone, or a situation that seems small but carries a weight you can't ignore. These moments don't come from nowhere. They are emotional triggers, specific signals that touch something sensitive inside you, and unless you recognize them, they will continue to control how you act, speak, and react. Learning to identify your emotional triggers is one of the most important steps toward personal control, because what you don't understand will keep disrupting your peace without warning. Triggers are not weaknesses. They are signs. They reveal where your emotional wounds are still open. They show you where you are still holding on to fear, pain, or unfinished experiences. Many of these responses began long ago, sometimes in childhood, sometimes during hard or confusing moments you didn't know how to process. The trigger itself may seem small, but the emotional weight it carries is heavy. That's why you overreact. That's why you shut down. That's why you avoid certain people or situations, because part of you is trying to protect yourself from feeling something again that once hurt you deeply. Most people aren't taught to identify their triggers. They're taught to suppress their feelings, tough it out, or avoid conflict. But suppression is not strength. Avoidance is not peace. These patterns only delay the emotional work that eventually must be done, and that work begins with awareness. You have to be willing to pause when you're emotionally activated and ask yourself what just happened. Not what the other person did, but what inside you reacted so strongly. This reflection is not easy. It requires honesty, without blame. But this is how you start to separate what happened from how you feel about it. Start by noticing the emotional patterns that repeat. Do you find yourself getting anxious every time someone questions your decisions? Do you get angry when someone interrupts you? Do you feel deeply rejected when you don't receive a response right away? These aren't random reactions. They are rooted in something deeper. Emotional triggers usually point to unmet needs, like the need to feel respected, heard, safe, loved, or valued. When those needs were denied or threatened in the past, your mind and body learned to respond with strong emotion. Identifying these patterns gives you the chance to stop reacting on autopilot. The body often feels the trigger before the mind can explain it. You might feel a sudden tightening in your chest, a flush of heat in your face, or a heaviness in your stomach. Don't ignore those signals. They are early warnings that something inside you has been activated. Pause, breathe, ask yourself what emotion is present. Then ask what thought came just before the emotion. You'll usually find that the trigger is tied to an old belief or past experience that's being repeated in a new form. This is not about overanalyzing every interaction. It's about tracing strong emotions to their source so you can respond with clarity. Naming your triggers takes courage. You might discover that you're still carrying emotional pain from years ago. You might see that you're sensitive to being dismissed because you were once ignored when your opinion mattered most. You might realize that criticism feels like an attack because you were punished for failing instead of being supported. These realizations are not meant to make you feel weak. They're meant to help you understand why certain things affect you more deeply than they should, because only through understanding can you begin to take your power back. Once you've identified a trigger, the next step is to manage your response. You cannot always control what triggers you, but you can control what you do next. Awareness gives you space between the trigger and the reaction. In that space, you get to decide who you want to be. You don't have to lash out. You don't have to shut down. You can choose a thoughtful, balanced response that reflects emotional maturity instead of emotional memory. That choice, repeated consistently, rewires the way you deal with discomfort. There's also value in communicating your triggers to the people closest to you. Not in a way that demands they change their behavior, but in a way that helps them understand you better. When you say, "I feel defensive when I'm interrupted because it makes me feel invisible," you give someone the chance to respond with empathy instead of confusion. You also give yourself the gift of being seen, not just for your reaction, but for the history behind it. This is how relationships deepen, through honest, respectful conversations about the things that shape us. You also need to recognize that not every trigger is someone else's responsibility. Sometimes your emotions are louder than the situation justifies, not because the other person did something wrong, but because you are still working through something unresolved. Blaming others for your triggers keeps you stuck. Taking ownership of your emotional response sets you free. This doesn't mean excusing harmful behavior from others. It means separating their behavior from your emotional habits so you can respond from strength rather than pain. Triggers can also change over time. What used to activate you might stop affecting you once you've faced it and healed it. That's why this process is ongoing. New environments, new relationships, new challenges may bring out different reactions. Keep paying attention. Keep asking yourself what the emotion is pointing toward. Keep practicing curiosity instead of judgment. This is how emotional growth becomes a way of life, not something you do once but something you live every day. You can also work with your triggers through reflection. At the end of each day, ask yourself, when did I feel a strong emotion today? What caused it? What did I think it meant? Was that meaning based on the present moment or a past experience? This kind of reflection helps you separate the facts of the situation from the emotional interpretation. Most triggers are fueled by the story you tell yourself about what happened. Change the story, and the trigger loses its grip. There is great strength in knowing your emotional landscape. When you know what sets you off, you can prepare for it. You can take a breath before responding. You can choose silence when needed. You can walk away, not in avoidance but in calm awareness. This isn't weakness, it's wisdom. You're not avoiding the moment. You're mastering it. That kind of self-control doesn't come from pretending you're unaffected. It comes from knowing what affects you and learning how to stay grounded anyway. Some triggers may never fully disappear, but they can lose their power. With awareness, honesty, and consistent practice, you can reduce their intensity and increase your emotional resilience. You may still feel the initial reaction, but it won't control you. You'll pause, breathe, choose. That space between feeling and action is where your freedom lives, and it's in that space that you shape the person you are becoming. Real growth happens when you stop trying to avoid discomfort and start understanding where it comes from. Your triggers are not flaws, they are opportunities. Each one is a doorway into deeper awareness, greater control, and lasting peace. When you meet your triggers with openness instead of resistance, they become your teachers, and when you learn from them, you stop living in reaction and start living with power. Every moment you take to understand your emotional triggers is a step toward a calmer, more focused life. It's a practice, it's a discipline, and it's a choice you can make today. The more you understand about what sets you off, the more you can step into situations with clarity instead of tension. You stop fearing your emotions because you've learned how to manage them, and in doing so, you become the kind of person who leads with strength, responds with purpose, and lives with intention. Chapter 4. Train your mind to respond with calm focus. There will always be things outside your control. People will speak without thinking. Plans will fall apart, pressure will build, and in those moments the way your mind responds will either make things worse or bring you closer to peace. A calm and focused response is not something that happens by accident. It's the result of training. It's the result of preparation, of practice, of choosing to lead your mind instead of letting it lead you. The world won't stop being loud, but your mind can stop adding to the noise. Training your mind to respond calmly begins with intention. Most people never decide how they want to respond when life gets hard. They just react out of habit. Their nervous system takes over, and before they realize it, they've spoken words they regret or made choices that created more problems. But your mind can be taught to pause. It can be taught to hold space between the situation and your response. That space is where your power lives. In that space, you get to choose clarity over chaos. You don't build calmness by avoiding conflict. You build it by facing difficulty with preparation. Mental preparation means knowing that challenges will come and deciding now who you will be in those moments. It means practicing stillness in ordinary situations, so that when pressure hits, you have a strong inner foundation. Every time you slow down before reacting, you strengthen this foundation. Every time you focus on what matters instead of what frustrates you, you train your mind to stay centered. Focus is not about shutting out distractions. It's about choosing where your attention goes. When something unexpected happens, your mind will want to spiral into blame, into fear, into worst-case thinking. You can interrupt that spiral by bringing your attention back to what is present and possible. Ask yourself, what can I do right now? What is useful here? What's the next best action? These questions redirect your energy from panic to purpose. Calm focus is not about having no emotion. It's about having authority over how you express it. You might feel irritated or stressed, but you can still speak with clarity. You might feel overwhelmed, but you can still move one step at a time. You don't have to be completely at peace to act with control. You only need to choose not to let emotion take the lead. Emotions rise and fall. Training your mind means learning to stay steady in the middle of the wave. One of the simplest and most effective tools for developing this steadiness is breath. When the mind speeds up, the breath shortens. When the breath deepens, the mind begins to slow down. In moments of tension, take a full breath through your nose and exhale slowly. This signals safety to the nervous system. It tells your body you are not in danger. It creates the space needed for the rational part of your brain to come back online. This isn't a trick, it's biology, and it's available to you at all times. Mental training also requires discipline in what you allow to shape your thinking. If your mind is constantly filled with distractions, drama, and negative input, it will reflect that in stressful situations. What you consume becomes the lens through which you see the world. Choose wisely. Read content that strengthens your focus. Spend time with people who are calm under pressure. Study how they speak, how they carry themselves, how they process difficulty. These are not just personality traits, they are learned patterns. You can learn them too. Another part of training your mind is creating routines that build mental clarity. Structure helps reduce chaos. Start your day with a moment of stillness. Take time to review what matters most. Set intentions, not just tasks. This keeps your thoughts anchored in purpose. When unexpected things happen, you return to that purpose instead of getting swept up in temporary emotions. Calmness doesn't come from control, it comes from alignment. When you live in alignment with what matters, chaos loses its power over you. You also need to train your internal language. What you say to yourself during stress becomes your mental environment. If you tell yourself that everything is falling apart, your mind will panic. But if you remind yourself that you've handled hard things before, your mind finds strength. Speak to yourself the way a calm leader would speak to their team in crisis, not with fear but with direction. Your mind listens to your words. Train those words to support peace. When things don't go as planned, the untrained mind seeks someone to blame. The trained mind seeks the next step. Blame drains energy. Direction restores it. Calm focus means asking better questions. Instead of "why is this happening to me?" ask "what is required of me now?" Instead of "how do I stop this?" ask "how do I grow through this?" These shifts in language create shifts in response. They move you from reaction to leadership. Your surroundings also influence your ability to stay calm. Clutter, noise, and disorganization make it harder to think clearly. Create spaces that support focus. Keep your environment clean. Build habits that reduce decision fatigue. Prepare in advance so you're not rushed. A calm mind is easier to access when the outer world is not competing for your attention. This is not about perfection, it's about intention. Make small changes that support a calmer way of living. You can also train your mind by visualizing how you want to respond before difficult situations occur. If you know you'll be in a challenging conversation, mentally rehearse how you'll stay grounded. Picture yourself listening fully before speaking. Imagine taking a breath before replying. This kind of mental practice builds confidence. It sends a message to your brain that you're capable. Then, when the moment arrives, your response is familiar. You're not reacting for the first time. You're doing what you've already prepared for. Calm focus is not reserved for people who were born with more patience. It's a skill that anyone can build with daily effort. You will not always get it right. You will have moments when your mind races, when emotions overwhelm, when focus slips. That's normal. The key is to notice it and return. Every time you bring your mind back to calm, you make that path stronger. Over time, it becomes easier to find your center because you've practiced returning to it. There's also value in using silence as a tool. You don't have to respond immediately, every situation. You don't have to fill every moment with words. Silence gives space for clarity to emerge. It allows emotions to settle. It creates room for wiser responses. The untrained mind feels uncomfortable with silence. The trained mind uses it as a source of strength. Focus also grows when you reduce mental multitasking. The brain is not meant to juggle 10 thoughts at once. Pick one task, give it your full attention. Finish it, then move to the next. This trains your mind to stay with the present instead of jumping ahead. When pressure comes, that habit of presence will become your anchor. You'll be less likely to panic because you've built the skill of staying with one moment at a time. There is freedom in being able to stay calm when others cannot. There is strength in being able to respond with clarity when things go wrong. This kind of focus is not showy or loud. It's quiet, it's disciplined, and it builds over time through small, consistent actions. Every day you have opportunities to practice. When someone cuts you off, when plans fall through, when you feel overwhelmed. These are not just frustrations, they are training grounds. The more you train your mind to respond with calm focus, the more capable you become in every area of life. Your decisions improve. Your relationships deepen. Your energy lasts longer. You become someone others can trust, not because you have all the answers, but because you can stay steady while you search for them. That steadiness is rare, and it's powerful. You can build it. You can live it. You can become the kind of person who walks into chaos and brings clarity. But it starts now. It starts with choosing your response, again and again, until it becomes who you are. That is mental mastery, and it's available to anyone who's willing to train. Chapter 5. Strengthen your self-talk to build emotional strength. The words you say to yourself shape the way you experience life. They determine how you see your value, how you handle setbacks, and how you navigate through pain. Self-talk is not just background noise. It's the script you follow when no one else is around. If your inner voice constantly criticizes, doubts, or discourages, it will weaken your emotional strength no matter how confident you appear on the outside. But if your self-talk is firm, respectful, and focused, you'll begin to build a foundation that no outside pressure can shake. Most people don't realize how often they talk down to themselves. They catch a mistake and instantly say, "I always mess this up." They face a challenge and think, "I'm not good enough to handle this." These words feel small, but they carry weight. Over time, they create patterns. Those patterns form beliefs, and those beliefs become self-fulfilling. Emotional strength begins with breaking this cycle. You cannot build a resilient life if the voice in your head keeps tearing you down. Changing your self-talk starts with awareness. Pay attention to the things you silently repeat to yourself. Especially in difficult moments, notice the phrases that rise automatically. When things go wrong, what's your default thought? When you're unsure, what's your inner reaction? Don't judge the answers, just observe them. This is how you catch the habits that have been quietly shaping your life without your permission. Once you see them clearly, you can challenge them. A strong internal voice does not mean pretending everything is perfect. It doesn't mean lying to yourself or forcing positivity. It means speaking to yourself in a way that supports growth. Instead of saying, "I can't do this," say, "This is hard, but I'm capable of learning." Instead of saying, "I'm terrible at this," say, "I'm improving every time I try." You are not denying the struggle, you are refusing to define yourself by it. Emotional strength grows when your self-talk focuses on effort, learning and resilience instead of final judgments. Another key to building powerful self-talk is learning how to speak with self-respect even when you fall short. Everyone fails, everyone feels overwhelmed, but not everyone knows how to respond with grace when they do. When you talk to yourself with kindness, you give your mind the space it needs to recover. Harshness doesn't create strength. It creates shame, and shame weakens your ability to get back up. Strength is built in the moments you fall, but still remind yourself, "I'm not done yet." Your self-talk also needs to stay rooted in truth. Not exaggerated fears, not worst-case scenarios, not old beliefs that no longer serve you. Your mind can tell stories that sound real, but aren't grounded in evidence. You might think, "Nobody cares about what I have to say," or "I'll never be able to change." But if you pause and examine those thoughts, you'll see they're often driven by fear, not facts. Challenge them. Ask yourself, is this absolutely true? What else could be true? What would I tell someone I love if they were thinking this way? Then say that to yourself. Another powerful practice is to develop personal statements that reflect your values and your strength. These are not slogans, they are reminders. Short, grounded phrases that you can return to in difficult moments. For example, "I've overcome before. I know how to stay steady. I choose what I believe about myself." Keep these statements simple, direct, and personal. Repeat them when your mind begins to spiral. Let them be anchors when doubt tries to take over. The way you talk to yourself also influences how you handle the opinions of others. If your inner voice is strong, external criticism doesn't hit as hard. You might feel it, but you won't absorb it. Emotional strength gives you the ability to listen to feedback without letting it define your worth. It allows you to stand firm when people misunderstand you because your value doesn't come from their words, it comes from your own. Your self-talk becomes especially important in moments of solitude. When there's no one around to validate you, support you, or encourage you, what do you hear inside your head? This is where true emotional strength is revealed. It's not built in crowds, it's built in quiet moments, when you choose to back yourself, even if no one else does. You are with yourself every day. Your inner voice is the one you hear most often. Make sure it's a voice that helps you grow. You can also strengthen your self-talk by celebrating progress. Not perfection, progress. If you handled a difficult situation better than before, recognize that. If you stayed calm when you used to panic, speak that into your mind. Self-talk is not just for recovery, it's for reinforcement. When you acknowledge your growth out loud, even in small ways, your brain begins to build confidence. It's not about ego, it's about building an internal track record of success. This becomes the evidence your mind leans on in harder times. It's also important to stop repeating the voices from your past that no longer belong in your life. Maybe someone told you years ago that you weren't good enough, or that you were too much, or that you'd never succeed. Without realizing it, you may have turned their voice into your own, but it's not yours. You have the right to rewrite that narrative. You have the power to choose new words, words that support the person you are becoming, not the wounds you are still healing. Self-talk is not just a mental habit, it's a tool for emotional regulation. In the middle of frustration, fear, or sadness, your words can either add fuel or offer calm. When something doesn't go as planned, your inner voice can say, "This always happens to me," or it can say, "I can figure this out." That choice matters. Over time, the way you speak to yourself becomes the emotional tone of your entire life. Choose that tone with intention. Sometimes, strengthening your self-talk also means setting boundaries around who gets to speak into your life. If you're surrounded by people who tear you down, it's hard to maintain a strong inner voice. Choose relationships that reflect the kind of voice you're working to build. Stay close to people who encourage truth, who support growth, and who respect your journey. Then let that tone carry over into your own inner dialogue. Consistency is key. You can't speak kindly to yourself once and expect it to transform everything. This is a daily discipline. Every morning, every stressful situation, every moment of doubt is an opportunity to reinforce new patterns. And it's okay if it feels awkward at first. If you've spent years criticizing yourself, speaking with respect will feel unfamiliar. But keep going. Keep practicing. You are not trying to sound perfect. You are trying to sound like someone who is on your own side. Eventually, your self-talk becomes the steady voice that carries you through chaos. The quiet assurance that says, "You're not alone, you're not broken, you're not stuck." It becomes the strength you rely on when things fall apart. The truth you return to when life gets heavy. And once you've built it, no one can take it away. Because it doesn't come from outside approval. It comes from within. Every step you take to speak better to yourself is a step toward a stronger emotional life. Every time you choose encouragement over judgment, direction over doubt, resilience over defeat, you become more grounded. And the more grounded you are, the more you're able to handle anything that comes your way. Your inner voice is either a weapon against yourself or a tool for your healing. Use it wisely, train it daily, make it a source of strength. Because you live with that voice every day, and when it's strong, so are you. Chapter 6. Practice deep listening to improve emotional connection. Most people think communication is about what they say, but the real strength in human connection comes from how well they listen. When someone speaks, they're not just delivering information, they're revealing pieces of themselves. Their words carry feelings, memories, struggles, and hopes. If you're not paying close attention, you miss the depth. You hear the surface, but not the heart. And when people feel unheard, they begin to pull back, emotionally and mentally. Deep listening is not just a social skill. It's a doorway to stronger emotional bonds, both with others and within yourself. Listening with depth requires more than silence. It means giving your full presence without interrupting, judging, or mentally preparing your reply. It's not about waiting for your turn to talk. It's about choosing to understand before you respond. Most conversations today are rushed. People skim each other's words the same way they skim headlines, quickly, impatiently, already thinking about the next topic. That kind of listening doesn't connect. It creates distance. It makes people feel dismissed even when you're technically in the same room. To listen deeply, you must learn to quiet your inner commentary, that running voice in your head that constantly evaluates, reacts, or compares. It needs to step aside when someone is sharing with you. Real listening means suspending your own urgency to be understood and focusing fully on understanding someone else. This is not always easy, especially when emotions are involved, but when you make that space for someone, you create safety, and people are drawn to those who make them feel safe. You also have to learn to listen beyond words. Pay attention to the tone, the pause, the hesitation, the shift in energy. These subtle cues often reveal more than the sentences themselves. If someone says, "I'm fine," but their voice lacks conviction or their eyes look away, deep listening helps you notice that. It tells you there's something unsaid. It allows you to ask gently, "Are you sure you're okay?" And that question, asked with sincerity, can unlock a conversation that might never have happened otherwise. Deep listening also involves removing distractions. You cannot truly connect when your phone is buzzing, your mind is wandering, or your focus is split. Multitasking during a conversation sends a message, even if you don't intend it. "You're not important enough for my full attention." That message builds emotional distance. On the other hand, when you give someone your undivided focus, it tells them they matter. You can say 1,000 kind things, but a few minutes of full presence often means more. Improving emotional connection through listening also means not rushing to fix, advise, or solve unless you're invited to. Most people don't want answers right away. They want to be seen, they want to be heard, without being analyzed. Sometimes, the most powerful thing you can offer is a calm, non-judgmental presence that says, "I hear you, I'm with you." That level of listening affirms someone's experience without needing to control it, and that, in turn, builds trust. One of the biggest mistakes people make in conversations is assuming they already know what the other person means. They finish sentences in their head, jump to conclusions, or filter what they hear through their own assumptions. But when you do that, you stop actually listening. Instead, stay curious. Ask clarifying questions. Say things like, "Can you help me understand that better?" Or, "What do you mean by that?" Curiosity shows respect. It tells the other person, "I value your perspective enough to explore it fully." Deep listening also includes listening during conflict, which is often when it's hardest. In arguments, most people listen defensively. They listen with the intent to respond, not to understand. They search for flaws in the other person's words instead of trying to grasp the emotions underneath. But if you train yourself to listen even when you're triggered, you'll find that arguments often lose their heat. People raise their voices when they don't feel heard, when they feel genuinely understood. The need to fight softens. In emotionally charged situations, you can listen with empathy by repeating what you've heard in your own words, not to parrot, but to show you're truly with them. You might say, "So what I'm hearing is that you felt dismissed in that moment. Is that right?" That kind of reflection creates clarity and shows you're not just listening, you're engaging. And from that place, deeper conversations unfold. Trust grows, defensiveness fades, emotional connection becomes possible. Practicing deep listening also reshapes how you listen to yourself. If you don't give your own thoughts and emotions the same level of attention you give others, you'll struggle to connect. Emotional connection begins with it. You need to understand your own reactions, recognize your own needs, and be honest about what's going on inside you. That kind of self-awareness makes you more emotionally available to others. You stop projecting. You stop reacting out of confusion. You become clear, and clarity strengthens every connection you have. This practice also requires patience. Deep listening doesn't rush conversations. It allows people the space to find their words. Sometimes that means silence, and silence is not awkward when it's purposeful. It gives both people room to think, to feel, to breathe. In a world that rushes everything, choosing to slow down and listen fully is a radical act of care. People remember how it felt to talk to someone who actually listened. That memory lingers longer than any advice or opinion you could give. You don't need special training to be a better listener. You just need to value the people in front of you enough to give them your attention. Practice with the people you care about most. When your friend calls, don't multitask. When your partner speaks, look them in the eye. When your child shares something, no matter how small, respond with genuine interest. These simple acts, done consistently, build relationships that last. The quality of your listening sets the tone for your relationships. It determines whether people feel safe with you, whether they open up or shut down. And in every emotional bond, safety is the foundation. People won't share their true thoughts or feelings if they sense they'll be misunderstood or ignored. But when they know you're listening not just to reply, but to really understand, they feel closer to you. That closeness is the heart of emotional connection. Deep listening is not a one-time achievement. It's a lifelong practice. Some days you'll do it well, other days you'll get distracted, impatient or reactive. But keep practicing. Every time you catch yourself drifting and gently return your focus to the other person, you strengthen the skill. Every time you pause your own need to speak and instead ask one more thoughtful question, you deepen the moment. And every time you listen without judgment, you offer a kind of acceptance that strengthens every relationship you're part of. What you'll discover through this practice is that people start showing you more of who they really are. They begin to trust you more. They feel emotionally safe around you. And in turn, you'll feel more connected, more grounded, and more present in your own life. You will no longer just hear what people say. You will understand what they mean. You will stop missing the moments that matter. And you will learn that listening, when done with care, is one of the most powerful ways to love. Chapter 7. Develop empathy to understand people without judgment. Understanding people without judgment begins with a decision. It's a quiet decision you make in your own mind to see the world through someone else's experience without rushing to label it right or wrong. It's not something that happens automatically. It's something you choose and practice, especially in moments when it feels inconvenient, uncomfortable, or confusing. Developing empathy doesn't require you to agree with everyone. It asks you to care enough to look beyond your own opinions. It challenges you to sit with another person's reality even when it doesn't match your own. The real test of empathy is not how you treat people who think like you, live like you, or behave how you would behave. The real test is how you respond when someone's story, attitude, or reaction feels foreign, emotional, or frustrating. That's when most people switch into judgment. They quickly sort people into categories. They start making assumptions about motives, intelligence, or character. But this creates distance. It shuts down understanding, and without understanding, real connection can't grow. Empathy begins when you stop trying to define someone else's life by your standards. When you see a person's reaction, behavior, or silence, you don't ask, why are they like that? Instead, you ask, what happened that led them here? That shift in thinking breaks down judgment. It replaces assumption with curiosity. It opens a door for compassion, even when the behavior itself doesn't make sense at first. Everyone you meet has a past that shaped them, and most of that past is invisible to you. Empathy is choosing to keep that in mind. To develop empathy, you must slow down and listen with intent. You don't just absorb the words, they're only part of the picture. You listen for the weight behind the words, the unsaid fears, the hidden shame, the subtle disappointments. And you don't interrupt it with advice or opinions. You hold space. You allow someone to feel seen without rushing them toward a solution. That alone is healing. That's what many people are truly looking for, not answers, but understanding. When you practice empathy consistently, your view of people changes. You stop needing to defend yourself all the time. You stop seeing others as threats to your comfort. You start recognizing that most people are doing their best with what they've been through. That doesn't mean you tolerate harmful behavior or ignore your boundaries. It means you stop responding with automatic blame or dismissal. You pause. You breathe. You give yourself time to consider that there's more to this person than this moment. Empathy also requires humility. It asks you to let go of the idea that you always know best. Just because something wouldn't hurt you doesn't mean it didn't hurt someone else. Just because you would have handled something differently doesn't mean someone else was wrong. People have different emotional wiring, different traumas, different ways of coping. If you think everyone should respond like you, you're not practicing empathy, you're projecting, and projection destroys the chance to understand anyone else deeply. To understand someone without judgment, you must also challenge your own bias. Everyone has bias. Silent expectations about what's normal, rational or appropriate, but those are often based on your own limited experience. Empathy means noticing when those expectations arise and choosing to look past them. When someone reacts with tears and you would have stayed silent, you don't judge their sensitivity. When someone shuts down and you would have talked it out, you don't label them cold. You allow differences to exist without assigning moral weight to them. Real empathy is quiet. It's not loud or performative. It doesn't need to announce itself. It shows up in the way you withhold judgment when it's easy to judge. It reveals itself in your patience, your willingness to ask thoughtful questions, your ability to be present with someone's pain without making it about your discomfort. And the more you practice it, the more emotionally intelligent you become. Not in theory, but in the way you relate to others in real life. When you meet someone with empathy instead of judgment, you create a space that feels safe. People instinctively feel whether they can be themselves around you. They notice when they don't have to filter every word to avoid being misunderstood. That safety deepens relationships. It makes people want to share more. It allows conversations to go deeper, faster, with more honesty, and you start to see the person. Not just the personality. You see the pain they never talk about. You hear the longing behind their laughter. You notice the strength behind their silence. Empathy also helps you understand your own emotions more clearly. When you learn to validate others, you become more capable of validating yourself. You stop calling yourself weak for struggling. You stop criticizing your own needs. Instead, you begin to treat your own inner experience with the same care you offer to others. That inner compassion builds emotional resilience. You don't need to numb your feelings or pretend you're always okay. You learn to be honest with yourself without shame, and that honesty makes you stronger, not weaker. As you grow in empathy, you'll notice it becomes easier to handle conflict. You won't take things so personally. You won't feel the need to win arguments or prove points. You'll want to understand what's really being said underneath the surface. You'll listen to people's fears instead of reacting to their tone. You'll become the kind of person others can talk to when things get hard. Not because you have all the answers, but because you don't rush to judge. Empathy also creates ripple effects. When you treat people with understanding, it influences how they treat others. Your calm presence calms others. Your patience teaches them to be more patient. Your non-judgmental approach gives them permission to drop their defenses. Over time, you create an environment where authenticity is welcomed, and in that environment, growth happens quietly, consistently, and deeply. This way of being doesn't just change how you relate to people, it changes how people see you. They feel your sincerity. They trust your presence. They're drawn to your steadiness, not because you agree with everything, but because you don't make them feel small when you disagree. You respect them enough to hear them out. You value their story even when it's messy. That's rare. And that kind of emotional presence makes a lasting impact. You don't have to be perfect at this. Developing empathy is not about never making mistakes. It's about noticing when your own judgment is rising and choosing a different response. It's about taking responsibility for the energy you bring into a conversation. It's about staying open, even when it would be easier to shut down. Every time you choose empathy, you become someone who adds healing to the world rather than more harm. And in a world full of quick opinions and harsh reactions, that is a powerful way to live. Chapter 8. Take full responsibility for how you react daily. Taking full responsibility for how you react each day is one of the most powerful decisions you can make, and also one of the most difficult. It requires you to stop blaming your stress, your past, your upbringing, or the behavior of others for the way you respond to life. It forces you to stop justifying outbursts, shutting down, or avoiding situations by pointing fingers outward. It asks you to look in the mirror, not with judgment, but with a willingness to grow. Because the truth is, you can't control everything that happens around you, but you are always in control of how you interpret it, how you respond, and how you carry it forward. This kind of responsibility is not about guilt. It's not about blaming yourself for every problem. It's about owning your choices. It's the quiet strength to say, I decide how I show up today, no matter what others do. When you fully take ownership of your emotional responses, you stop giving away your power. You no longer allow other people's moods or mistakes to dictate your peace. You stop being a passenger in your own emotional life. You become the one steering the wheel, calmly and deliberately. Every moment, you're faced with the opportunity to respond with awareness or react on impulse. When someone speaks harshly to you, you can escalate the tension, or you can breathe and create space. When something frustrating happens, you can curse the situation, or you can decide to face it with patience. The choice is always yours, even when it doesn't feel like it. And the more you practice that choice, the more natural it becomes. You start to realize that you're not your anger. You're not your irritation. You're not your frustration. Those are passing reactions, but they don't have to define you unless you let them. They show up, you notice them, but you don't act on them automatically. You give yourself the pause. That pause is where your power lives. It's the space between the trigger and your response, and in that space, you can choose something wiser, something stronger, something aligned with the kind of person you want to be. Taking responsibility also means being honest about your patterns. If you notice you react with defensiveness every time you feel criticized, that's a sign to look inward. If you withdraw whenever you're uncomfortable, that's not someone else's fault, it's your work to face. If you explode in anger when things don't go your way, that's a signal to develop discipline. These reactions might have once served you in survival mode, but they no longer serve your growth. Being honest about them is not weakness, it's maturity. This kind of self-awareness isn't built in one day. It takes observation. It takes reflection. It takes humility. You might catch yourself reacting in the same old ways out of habit, but instead of judging yourself, you use that moment as feedback. You say, that wasn't the best version of me, but now I know. And next time, I'll do better. That's responsibility in action. You don't dwell in guilt. You extract wisdom from your missteps and move forward with intention. And here's the quiet truth. Once you start living this way, people around you notice. They feel your steadiness. They see you not overreacting when others would. They sense your thoughtfulness in situations where emotion used to take over. This doesn't make you perfect, but it does make you respected. People start trusting you more because they see you handle yourself with control and awareness. They don't have to walk on eggshells around you. They know that even if things get tense, you won't lose yourself in the moment. That kind of presence is rare. Responsibility also means not waiting for others to change before you feel better. If you're always waiting for someone else to apologize, fix the situation, or behave differently before you calm down, you're giving them control over your emotions. But when you take full ownership, you give yourself the freedom to feel peace regardless of outside conditions. That doesn't mean tolerating mistreatment. It means recognizing that your emotional regulation isn't something anyone else can do for you. It's your job, and you're capable of it. Some people hold on to resentment for years, believing that the anger protects them. They replay old arguments in their mind, waiting for justice or closure. But real power comes when you decide to let go, not because the other person deserves it, but because you deserve freedom. Carrying bitterness only poisons your own peace. Choosing to release it, choosing to respond differently, choosing to step out of the cycle, that's a kind of strength most people never access. Daily responsibility for your reactions also includes how you speak to yourself. When you make a mistake, do you immediately criticize yourself, or do you offer grace and use it as a lesson? When you're tired or overwhelmed, do you push yourself harder, or do you listen to what your body and mind need? Taking responsibility is not just about your behavior outwardly, it's about how you manage your inner world. It's about being the kind of inner leader you'd want guiding you, calm, kind, honest, and clear. Even small, everyday moments offer opportunities to practice. Someone cuts you off in traffic. A coworker sends a rude message. Your plans fall through. These are not dramatic events, but how you handle them matters. Do you spiral into complaints, or do you pause and reset? Do you take things personally, or do you keep perspective? Each time you respond with calm and clarity, you're training yourself to rise above noise. You're becoming stronger, not by avoiding challenges, but by meeting them with better habits. Over time, you begin to see emotional responsibility not as a burden, but as freedom. You stop waiting for ideal circumstances. You stop needing validation from others to stay centered. You learn to trust yourself. You carry yourself with more grace because you know you don't need to match the energy around you. You set the tone, and as that becomes your standard, life starts to feel less chaotic. Not because challenges disappear, but because you're no longer controlled by them. This work is quiet, but transformative. No one sees the inner effort it takes to pause before reacting, to reflect before speaking, to choose patience over pride. But you feel the effects. You sleep better. You feel more peace in your interactions. You recover faster from emotional turbulence. You're no longer a hostage to your own triggers. You've taken the steering wheel back. You do this not because it's easy, but because you understand the cost of staying reactive. You've seen what it does to relationships, to self-respect, to inner peace. You know that blaming others keeps you stuck. So you do the work. You choose responsibility daily, not for perfection, but for growth. Not to impress others, but to free yourself. You decide every day that no matter what the world throws at you, your response is yours to own. And that choice, made again and again, builds the kind of strength nothing can shake. Chapter 9. Use breath control to reset your emotional state. Breath is the one constant you have no choice but to keep with you every moment of your life. It's so automatic that most people don't give it a second thought, yet it holds incredible power over your emotional state. Learning to control your breath is one of the simplest and most effective ways to reset your mind and body when emotions run high. It's a tool that requires no equipment, no special place, and no complicated technique. All it demands is your attention. When you master your breath, you gain a powerful way to calm anxiety, clear mental fog, and regain focus in even the most challenging situations. Your breath and emotions are tightly connected. When you feel fear, anger, or stress, your breathing pattern changes. It becomes shallow, fast, or uneven. This kind of breath sends signals to your brain that danger is near, triggering a fight or flight response. Your heart races, muscles tense, and your mind floods with urgent thoughts. You might feel overwhelmed, reactive, or stuck in a negative loop. But the beautiful truth is that breath also works the other way around. When you intentionally change your breathing pattern, you send a signal to your nervous system that it's safe to relax. Your body calms, your heart rate slows, and your mind clears. You reset your emotional state by simply changing how you breathe. The first step to using breath control effectively is awareness. Notice how you breathe when you're calm versus when you're stressed. Do you hold your breath? Do you breathe shallowly? Do your shoulders rise toward your ears? When you become aware of your default breathing patterns, you gain insight into your emotional habits. This awareness alone can begin to shift your relationship with your emotions. You start catching the physical signs that emotions are rising before your mind fully registers them. That gives you an opportunity to intervene early. One of the most effective breath techniques is slow, deep breathing through the nose. When you inhale, aim to fill your lungs fully, expanding your belly first and then your chest. On the exhale, allow your body to relax completely as you breathe out smoothly and fully. Count your breath if it helps. Inhale for a count of 4, hold for a count of 4, exhale for a count of 6 or 8. This longer exhale encourages your nervous system to shift from a state of alertness to one of calmness. Practicing this pattern just a few times in a row can bring immediate relief from tension. Controlled breathing works because it activates the parasympathetic nervous system, which is responsible for rest and recovery. When you take a moment to breathe deeply, your body produces less stress hormone and more calming chemicals. Your blood pressure lowers, your muscles release tightness, and your brain enters a state where it can think more clearly. This physiological change supports better decision-making and emotional regulation. Instead of reacting impulsively to a trigger, you gain the ability to respond thoughtfully. In daily life, breath control is like hitting the reset button. You don't need to wait for a big crisis. If you feel irritation building when a coworker interrupts or anxiety creeping in before a presentation, pause and focus on your breath. Even a few cycles of deep breathing will make a difference. This practice doesn't require perfect form or a quiet space, just your intention to breathe more deliberately. It's a small action with outsized effects, and it can prevent emotional spirals before they start. Some people find it helpful to pair breath control with a simple phrase or focus word. For example, on the inhale, think calm, and on the exhale, think release. This anchors your mind to the physical act of breathing and draws your attention away from stressful thoughts. You create a mental and physical habit that signals safety. Over time, your mind will automatically associate that breath pattern with emotional control. This conditioning is a form of emotional self-training that becomes more effective with consistent practice. Breath control also enhances mindfulness. When you pay attention to your breath, you're practicing presence, fully experiencing the here and now. This presence disrupts the cycle of rumination, where your mind gets stuck in past regrets or future worries. It brings you back to the moment, where you have the greatest power to choose your response. The more you practice this, the more resilient you become. You stop letting emotions sweep you away. You build a calm center inside yourself that anchors you through uncertainty. In moments of intense emotion, it can feel impossible to remember to breathe. Your body feels flooded, and your mind races. That's exactly when breath control matters most. Begin with simple steps. Close your eyes if you can. Place one hand on your belly and feel it rise and fall with each breath. Focus only on that sensation. Allow your breathing to slow naturally without forcing it. This gentle focus interrupts panic or anger and helps you regain control. Even if you only manage one slow, deep breath, it makes a difference. Regular practice strengthens your breath control muscle. Like any skill, it improves with repetition. You can practice first thing in the morning, during breaks, or before sleep. Set aside 5 minutes to breathe deeply and observe your body. Notice any tension or tightness and let it go with your exhale. Build this practice into your routine so that when real challenges arise, you instinctively turn to your breath. It becomes a trusted tool that supports your emotional health throughout the day. Breath control also pairs well with other emotional regulation techniques like grounding exercises or positive visualization. After calming your body with breath, imagine a safe place or a moment when you felt strong and peaceful. Combine the physical sensation of breath with positive mental images to deepen the calming effect. This synergy helps your nervous system reset more fully. You'll find you recover faster from stress and carry a sense of calm longer. It's important to remember that breath control is not about avoiding emotions or pretending they don't exist. Emotions are signals, valuable information about your needs and boundaries. Breath control helps you stay with those emotions without being overwhelmed by them. It's a way to face difficulty with steadiness and clarity rather than chaos and confusion. When you breathe consciously, you acknowledge your experience while holding yourself with care. Many people underestimate the power of breath because it feels so ordinary, but it is one of the most accessible and effective tools for emotional mastery. You can use it anywhere, anytime. It requires no special training or equipment. It's always with you, ready to support you. Choosing to engage with your breath in moments of stress is a small act of self-discipline that pays enormous dividends in resilience, clarity, and peace. As you integrate breath control into your life, you'll notice subtle shifts. Your mood stabilizes. You respond to challenges with more calm. Your relationships improve because you bring steadiness rather than reactivity. You sleep better because your body learns how to relax more deeply. Your mind becomes clearer, more focused, and more able to handle complexity. Breath becomes your silent ally in the daily work of emotional intelligence. Ultimately, controlling your breath is about reclaiming your inner calm in a noisy world. It reminds you that no matter how much life throws at you, you have a way to pause, reset, and face the next moment with strength. When you master your breath, you master a doorway into emotional freedom. It's a gift you give yourself every time you choose to breathe with intention, and it's a practice that supports every other step you take toward managing your emotions and achieving success. Chapter 10. Break reactive habits and choose thoughtful behavior. Breaking reactive habits and choosing thoughtful behavior is essential for personal growth and emotional mastery. Reactive behavior happens automatically, often driven by old patterns, past conditioning, or emotional triggers that hijack our responses before we have a chance to think. This automaticity might feel like it protects us or keeps us safe, but in reality, it often leads to regret, damaged relationships, and missed opportunities. When you break free from reaction, you step into a new space of freedom. Thoughtful behavior means acting with intention, clarity, and self-awareness, rather than being swept away by impulse. The first step toward changing reactive habits is recognizing them without judgment. Pay close attention to the moments when your emotions spike quickly. Notice how your body responds: racing heart, tight chest, clenched jaw, rapid thoughts. Those physical signs are clues that you are on the edge of reacting. Being able to identify these moments before acting is a key skill. It allows you to hit pause and ask yourself, is this how I want to respond? This awareness alone begins the process of change. Reactions are often fueled by a sense of urgency or threat. Your brain interprets a situation as dangerous, even if it's just a disagreement or minor frustration. This perceived threat triggers survival instincts that prioritize quick responses over thoughtful choices. Understanding that your body and brain are doing what they're wired to do can help you be more compassionate with yourself. You're not weak or broken for reacting. You've just been conditioned to respond that way. The goal is to build new habits that override those automatic responses with conscious decisions. Breaking a reactive habit requires creating space between stimulus and response. This space is where thoughtful behavior lives. To cultivate this space, develop strategies that slow down your reactions. One simple and effective method is counting silently to 5 before speaking or acting. This brief pause interrupts the impulse and gives your rational mind time to catch up. Over time, this pause becomes a habit, and you naturally respond with more calm and intention. Other techniques include taking a few deep breaths, stepping away physically if possible, or simply focusing your attention on your senses to ground yourself. Thoughtful behavior also involves asking yourself meaningful questions in those critical moments. Instead of reacting based on emotion, you can ask, what outcome do I want here? Or how can I respond in a way that reflects my values? These questions shift your focus from immediate feelings to long-term goals and character. They help you remember that your behavior shapes your reputation, your relationships, and your self-respect. Acting with awareness makes your life feel more coherent and purposeful. It's important to prepare yourself for setbacks. Old reactive habits are deeply ingrained and won't disappear overnight. There will be times when you slip back into familiar patterns. When this happens, don't criticize yourself harshly. Instead, treat those moments as learning opportunities. Reflect on what triggered you, how you could respond differently next time, and what tools you can use to support your growth. Persistence is more important than perfection. Every small step forward rewires your brain toward thoughtful behavior. Building thoughtful behavior also means developing emotional regulation skills. Recognize your emotional triggers and work on managing the intensity of your feelings. Techniques like breath control, mindfulness, and self-compassion strengthen your ability to stay centered. When you feel balanced inside, you're less likely to react impulsively. You create a foundation of emotional resilience that supports deliberate choices, even under pressure. Another key to breaking reactive habits is communication. Practice expressing your thoughts and feelings clearly and calmly rather than allowing frustration or anger to build. Use I statements that focus on your experience instead of blaming others. For example, say, I feel upset when plans change last minute, instead of you never respect my time. This kind of communication reduces defensiveness and opens space for constructive dialogue. Thoughtful behavior is not only about controlling your actions, but also about fostering understanding and connection. Environment and relationships influence your habits deeply. Surround yourself with people who model thoughtful behavior and who encourage your growth. When you're around reactive individuals, it's harder to maintain your new habits. Choose to engage with those who inspire patience, kindness, and calmness. You can learn from their example and receive support when challenges arise. This positive environment becomes a feedback loop that reinforces your commitment to change. Journaling can also be a powerful tool to break reactive habits. Write about situations where you reacted quickly and how you might respond differently in the future. Reflect on patterns that emerge over time. Journaling creates self-awareness and accountability. It helps you track progress and celebrate small victories, which motivates continued effort. It's essential to remember that thoughtful behavior doesn't mean suppressing your emotions or pretending everything is fine. It means acknowledging your feelings honestly while choosing how to express them constructively. Emotions are valid signals about your needs and boundaries. Thoughtful behavior respects those emotions without letting them dictate your actions. You honor your inner experience and maintain control over your external response. This practice also requires patience with yourself and others. Change is a process, and everyone moves at their own pace. When you're patient, you reduce frustration and cultivate kindness. You give yourself room to grow instead of demanding immediate perfection. Patience is a form of strength that sustains you through the inevitable challenges of change. The benefits of choosing thoughtful behavior extend far beyond individual moments. Over time, this habit builds emotional intelligence, deepens relationships, and enhances your reputation. People see you as reliable, steady, and respectful. They trust you in difficult situations because you don't let emotions control you. This trust opens doors in both personal and professional life. It creates opportunities for influence and leadership because thoughtful behavior inspires confidence. In everyday life, the choice between reactive habits and thoughtful behavior shows up in countless ways. It's how you respond to criticism, handle delays, navigate conflict, and manage stress. Each decision shapes your character and your future. Thoughtful behavior makes you a creator rather than a victim of your circumstances. It shifts power back to you and allows you to build the life you want with intention. This change starts with commitment. Decide that you will no longer let old patterns run your life. Commit to noticing your reactions, creating space, and choosing deliberately. Practice consistently. Surround yourself with support. Be patient. Over time, your efforts compound. Your life becomes a reflection of your values, not your impulses. You become someone who responds to challenges with wisdom, grace, and strength. Breaking reactive habits and choosing thoughtful behavior is a journey of transformation. It's a practice of self-mastery that requires courage and persistence. But the rewards are profound: peace of mind, stronger relationships, and greater success. When you embrace this path, you step into your power and become the author of your emotional life. This is not just a skill to learn, it is a way of being that changes everything. Chapter 11. Create healthy boundaries to protect your energy. Setting healthy boundaries is an essential skill for preserving your emotional well-being and maintaining your energy. Boundaries serve as invisible lines that protect your mental and physical space from being overwhelmed by others' demands, negativity, or unrealistic expectations. Without clear limits, you risk exhaustion, resentment, and emotional depletion. Creating boundaries is not about pushing people away or being selfish. It's about honoring your needs so you can show up fully and authentically in every aspect of your life. Understanding that your energy is a finite resource is critical. Each interaction, decision, or obligation takes a part of your emotional fuel. When you say yes to everything, you drain yourself. When you allow toxic or draining relationships to dominate your time, your energy wanes. Healthy boundaries help you manage how and where you spend your emotional power. This is not a one-time event, but an ongoing practice that requires awareness and courage. The first step in creating boundaries is clarity about what you need to protect. Reflect on situations where you have felt overwhelmed, used, or drained. Identify specific behaviors, environments, or people that challenge your peace. Sometimes the challenge is saying no to extra commitments that steal your time. Other times, it's about limiting conversations that pull you into drama or negativity. Knowing what depletes you gives you a clear target for where boundaries are necessary. Communicating your boundaries clearly and kindly is vital. Boundaries are only effective when others understand them. This means expressing your limits without apology or over-explanation. For example, saying, "I am not available to talk after 8 p.m." or "I need to focus on my work without interruptions," sets clear expectations. You don't have to justify your needs or feel guilty. Healthy boundaries come from respect for yourself, not from fear of disappointing others. Many people fear setting boundaries because they worry about rejection or conflict. However, setting limits often improves relationships. When you clearly state what you need, you reduce misunderstandings and resentment. Others appreciate knowing where you stand, even if it takes some adjustment. Boundaries create a foundation of honesty and trust that allows relationships to grow stronger and healthier. Physical boundaries are just as important as emotional ones. Protecting your space includes how you manage your time, physical environment, and personal health. Prioritize rest, exercise, and nutrition because these habits support your emotional resilience. Saying no to activities or obligations that drain your energy is a form of self-care. When you care for your body and mind, you increase your capacity to handle life's challenges with calm and clarity. Boundary setting is a continuous process. As your life changes, your limits might need adjustment. New jobs, relationships, or challenges can require different boundaries. Regularly check in with yourself about what feels manageable and what feels overwhelming. Listen to your body and emotions. They are signals guiding you to protect yourself better. Adjust your boundaries without hesitation to maintain balance and energy. It's common to encounter resistance when you begin setting boundaries, especially from people who are used to old patterns. Some might test your limits or react negatively. Stay firm but compassionate. Remember that your boundaries are about self-respect, not about controlling others. Consistency is key. The more you uphold your limits, the more others will learn to respect them. Over time, your energy will stabilize and your interactions will improve. Learning to say no is one of the most practical ways to protect your energy. Saying no does not mean shutting people out. It means creating space for what truly matters to you. Practice saying no firmly, but politely. You can say, "I can't take that on right now," or "I'm focusing on my priorities today." These responses honor your time and energy without burning bridges. Saying no is a skill that builds your confidence and keeps your resources focused. Boundaries also include managing how you engage with information and technology. Constant notifications, social media, and news can drain your attention and energy. Set limits on your screen time, especially before bed. Create periods during your day where you disconnect and focus on presence and restoration. Protecting your mental space from overload is just as important as setting interpersonal boundaries. Creating healthy boundaries means respecting your emotional limits. If you notice recurring feelings of irritation, exhaustion, or overwhelm around certain people or situations, it's a sign to reassess your limits. Emotional boundaries protect you from absorbing others' negativity or drama. You don't have to carry the weight of everyone else's problems. Being available to help doesn't mean sacrificing your well-being. Remember that boundary setting is an act of self-love. It communicates to yourself and others that your needs matter. It's a foundation for sustainable emotional health and success. When you protect your energy, you're better equipped to handle stress, make clear decisions, and engage deeply with what matters. Boundaries allow you to bring your best self to your work, relationships, and personal growth. As you practice setting boundaries, you develop greater self-awareness and confidence. You learn to listen deeply to your feelings and respect them without guilt. You become more selective about how you invest your time and energy. This selectivity is not exclusivity, but wisdom. It's choosing quality over quantity, depth over distraction. This shift transforms your daily experience and strengthens your resilience. Healthy boundaries also improve your ability to say yes when it counts. When your energy is protected, you can commit fully to opportunities that align with your goals and values. You engage with enthusiasm and presence instead of obligation or exhaustion. This kind of engagement leads to better results and deeper satisfaction. Creating boundaries is a lifelong practice that grows with you. It requires patience and persistence. You may stumble or face pushback, but every effort reinforces your emotional strength. Boundaries are not walls, but gates that you control. You decide who and what crosses into your space. This control is empowering and essential for managing your emotions and achieving lasting success. Taking the time to set and maintain healthy boundaries is one of the most effective ways to guard your peace and maintain your energy. It honors your worth and supports your emotional intelligence. When you commit to this practice, you build a solid foundation for resilience, clarity, and personal growth. Boundaries are a gift you give yourself that benefits every part of your life. Chapter 12. Reflect each day to grow emotional clarity fast. Taking time each day to reflect deeply on your experiences is one of the fastest ways to gain emotional clarity and grow in self-awareness. Reflection is not merely thinking about your day, but engaging in purposeful, honest examination of your feelings, choices, and reactions. It's a practice that turns the noise of daily life into meaningful insights. When you reflect regularly, you begin to recognize patterns, uncover hidden emotions, and understand what drives your behavior. This clarity is the foundation for change, because you can only improve what you truly see. Reflection creates a safe space where you can be honest with yourself, without fear of judgment. In this quiet moment, you examine your emotional landscape with curiosity rather than blame. You ask yourself questions like, what emotions did I experience today? What triggered those feelings? How did I respond? What could I have done differently? This process illuminates the connections between your external events and internal reactions. Over time, you build a clear map of your emotional habits and triggers. The power of reflection lies in turning experience into learning. Life presents challenges, successes, and setbacks every day. Without reflection, these moments can pass unnoticed or become tangled in unconscious patterns. With reflection, each moment becomes an opportunity for growth. For example, if you noticed feeling irritated during a conversation, reflection helps you understand why. Perhaps it touched on a sensitive issue or revealed an unmet need. Understanding these subtleties helps you manage future situations with more awareness and skill. Daily reflection also strengthens your emotional vocabulary. Often, people struggle with clarity because they lump their feelings into broad categories like good or bad. When you reflect, you practice identifying specific emotions: anger, disappointment, joy, fear, frustration. This specificity makes emotions easier to manage because you're not fighting vague discomfort, but addressing concrete feelings. Naming emotions brings them into the light where you can work with them, rather than letting them simmer beneath the surface. A simple but effective way to cultivate reflection is journaling. Writing about your emotional experiences encourages you to slow down and organize your thoughts. Journaling can be free-flowing or guided with questions like, what emotion was strongest today? What situation challenged me emotionally? How did I handle it? What did I learn about myself? The act of writing externalizes your internal world and clarifies complex feelings. Over time, you create a record of growth and insight that you can revisit and build upon. Reflection also promotes emotional responsibility. When you take the time to examine your feelings and reactions, you stop blaming others or circumstances for your state of mind. Instead, you own your emotional experience and the role you play in shaping it. This ownership is empowering because it shifts you from victimhood to agency. You realize that while you can't control everything that happens, you can control how you interpret and respond. Reflection nurtures this mindset by making you aware of your choices. Another important aspect of reflection is gratitude. When you review your day, noticing moments of kindness, achievement, or connection balances your perspective. Gratitude grounds you in the positive, even amid challenges. It reminds you of your strengths and resources, which builds emotional resilience. Including gratitude in your reflection practice creates a more balanced emotional outlook and reduces negativity bias. Reflection deepens your understanding of your values and priorities. Emotions often signal when you're aligned or out of alignment with what matters most to you. If you felt uneasy after a decision, reflecting on why helps you see if you compromised your values. Conversely, feeling fulfilled or joyful often indicates alignment. This insight guides future choices, helping you live more authentically and purposefully. Reflection is like a compass that keeps you on course. To make reflection effective, create a daily routine that fits your lifestyle. It can be a few minutes before bed, during a morning walk, or while sipping tea. Consistency builds habit and makes reflection a natural part of your day. Choose a quiet space where you can be undisturbed, turn off distractions, and focus fully on the practice. The more intentional you are, the richer your insights will be. Reflection also encourages self-compassion. As you examine your emotional reactions, it's easy to fall into self-criticism. Instead, approach your reflections with kindness. Understand that growth involves mistakes and setbacks. Celebrate your efforts and progress. This compassionate stance supports emotional healing and motivates continued practice. It transforms reflection from a critique session into a supportive conversation with yourself. The benefits of daily reflection extend beyond personal growth. As you gain emotional clarity, your relationships improve. You become more aware of how your emotions affect others and how theirs affect you. This awareness enhances empathy and communication. You respond to conflict with greater calm and insight. You build stronger connections based on understanding rather than misunderstanding. Reflection also enhances decision-making. Clear emotional insight helps you avoid impulsive choices driven by fleeting feelings. You learn to pause, gather your thoughts, and choose actions that align with your goals and values. This leads to better outcomes and increased confidence in your decisions. Over time, reflection builds wisdom that guides your life. In moments of high stress or confusion, reflection serves as an anchor. When emotions run wild, looking back with intention helps you regain perspective. You see the situation from a broader angle, understand the root causes, and identify steps to move forward. This clarity reduces overwhelm and increases your sense of control. Reflection is not about dwelling on the past, but about learning from it. It's an active process that fuels growth rather than regret. When you commit to reflecting each day, you accelerate your emotional intelligence. You develop the habit of turning every experience into insight and every insight into action. This cycle of reflection and growth propels you toward the success and resilience you seek. The practice of reflection builds a foundation for lifelong emotional clarity. Each day's insights accumulate, creating a rich internal understanding that guides your behavior and choices. This foundation supports continuous improvement, helping you navigate life's complexities with wisdom and grace. Reflection sharpens your emotional lens, so you see yourself and others more clearly. Developing this daily habit transforms how you live emotionally. Instead of reacting blindly or being tossed by feelings, you respond with awareness and intention. You gain confidence in managing your inner world. You create a rhythm of learning and adaptation that keeps you moving forward. Reflection turns your emotions from unpredictable forces into valuable teachers. Ultimately, reflecting each day is an act of self-care and empowerment. It honors your emotional experience and invests in your growth. This practice helps you become the person you want to be: clear, calm, resilient, and connected. The faster you build this habit, the sooner you'll see meaningful change. Reflection unlocks emotional clarity that supports every step of your journey towards success. Chapter 13. Replace blame with curiosity during tough moments. Blame often feels like a natural response when something goes wrong. It offers a sense of control, a place to direct frustration, and temporary relief from discomfort. But in reality, blame closes the door to progress. It blocks understanding, prevents learning, and keeps you stuck in cycles of emotional conflict. Choosing curiosity in tough moments, instead of defaulting to blame, creates a powerful shift. Curiosity invites you to investigate, to learn, and to grow. It allows you to ask different questions, questions that lead to clarity rather than resentment. While blame focuses on assigning fault, curiosity focuses on uncovering the truth beneath the surface. In difficult situations, emotions tend to run high. You might feel disappointed, hurt, or betrayed. When these feelings emerge, the immediate impulse is often to find someone to hold responsible. Blame steps in quickly. It sounds like, "Why did they do this to me?" Or "If only they hadn't done that." But if you pause for just a moment and choose a different lens, one rooted in curiosity, you open the door to understanding what really happened. Curiosity sounds like, "What led to this situation?" Or "What can I learn from this about myself and others?" Curiosity requires emotional presence. It means slowing down your automatic responses and intentionally shifting your perspective. When you do this, you gain access to a deeper layer of insight. For example, if someone speaks to you harshly, blame might lead you to immediately label them as rude or uncaring. But if you replace blame with curiosity, you might begin to ask, "What's going on in their world that made them react this way? Or did I say something that unintentionally triggered them?" This doesn't mean excusing harmful behavior, but it does mean seeking a full understanding before reacting. By being curious, you take responsibility for your role in the dynamic without overburdening yourself with guilt or self-blame. You simply become a student of the moment, open to discovery. This openness builds emotional intelligence. Instead of repeating the same reactionary patterns, you begin to adapt. You become more thoughtful, more centered, and more skillful in how you handle future moments of tension. You stop recycling blame and instead begin to explore root causes and personal growth opportunities. Curiosity changes the quality of your questions. Blame asks, "Who is at fault?" and tends to focus outward. Curiosity asks, "What is this moment trying to show me?" and pulls your attention inward. When you explore your own assumptions, triggers, and expectations, you start seeing how your inner there shapes your experience. This kind of self-reflection deepens self-awareness. It also allows for more compassionate communication with others, because you're not just reacting to what they did, you're understanding why it affected you the way it did. In moments of conflict, curiosity gives you the strength to listen. When you let go of blame, you create space to hear someone's perspective without defensiveness. You can ask real questions and be open to answers that challenge your current view. You don't have to agree with everything you hear, but the simple act of listening from a place of curiosity rather than judgment can transform the conversation. People feel safer when they're not being accused. They become more willing to open up, and from that openness, connection is restored. Curiosity also dissolves rigid thinking. Blame tends to be black and white. Someone is wrong and someone is right. But human behavior is rarely that simple. Life is complex, emotions are layered, and motivations are not always clear. Curiosity allows you to sit with that complexity without needing immediate resolution. It helps you tolerate ambiguity and remain calm while you explore what's really going on. This mental flexibility is a strength. It keeps you from making rash decisions or saying things you'll regret. In your relationship with yourself, replacing blame with curiosity is just as important. When you make a mistake, it's easy to fall into self-blame. Why did I do that? Or I should have known better. But this inner criticism only adds weight to your emotional burden. Instead, you can practice self-curiosity. What was I feeling in that moment? Or what belief influenced that choice? This gentle investigation builds self-compassion and personal growth. You begin to see missteps not as failures, but as information. You move from self-punishment to self-discovery. Making this shift consistently takes practice. It's not easy to be curious when you're upset, disappointed, or afraid. But every time you choose curiosity, you rewire your response to stress. You train your mind to seek insight rather than blame. This new habit doesn't erase the challenges you face, but it changes how you engage with them. You bring a calmer, wiser, and more resilient self into every situation. Over time, your relationships deepen, your communication improves, and your emotional stability grows. One of the most powerful questions you can ask in hard moments is, what else could be true here? This question invites you to look beyond your initial interpretation. It encourages you to consider other perspectives, other motivations, and other explanations. It helps you loosen the grip of certainty and open to discovery. Often, your first conclusion is based on emotion, not fact. Curiosity gives you time to test those assumptions and find a more complete picture. In high-stress situations, curiosity acts like a pause button. Instead of reacting on autopilot, you create a moment of stillness where you can choose your next move with intention. This pause might only last a few seconds, but it's enough to stop the cycle of blame and replace it with thoughtful engagement. Over time, these pauses become a habit. You develop the ability to stay calm and centered even when things feel chaotic. You stop fueling conflict and start fostering clarity. Choosing curiosity is not about avoiding accountability. It's about expanding your understanding before making judgments. Accountability is still important, but it's informed by insight, not driven by anger. When curiosity comes first, your decisions are more balanced and your actions more effective. You become less reactive and more grounded. You deal with problems from a place of awareness, not from emotional turbulence. Curiosity also builds trust. When people see that you're willing to understand before you accuse, they feel respected. This doesn't mean tolerating harmful behavior, but it does mean engaging with people in a way that honors their complexity. You invite them into a conversation rather than a confrontation. That shift alone can repair damage, de-escalate tension, and restore connection. Trust is often broken by blame and rebuilt through curiosity. When you stop blaming and start exploring, you grow. You stop repeating the same arguments, holding on to the same resentment, and walking in circles around the same frustrations. You break the cycle and begin to rise above it. You transform emotional challenges into learning opportunities. Every tough moment becomes a chance to understand yourself and others more deeply. And that understanding leads to better choices, better relationships, and a more peaceful mind. This shift is not just about feeling better, it's about becoming better. It's about stepping into a new way of responding to life, where growth replaces reaction, and exploration replaces accusation. In this mindset, Even the hardest moments can serve you. You're no longer at the mercy of your emotions. You're in partnership with them, learning from every experience and using that learning to move forward. This is how you build emotional maturity. This is how you create lasting inner strength. Chapter 14. Track emotional patterns to build emotional discipline. Most people go through their days without realizing how often their emotions are steering their behavior. They respond to stress, frustration, disappointment, or even joy with automatic habits that seem natural but are actually deeply ingrained reactions, shaped over time. Without noticing it, these emotional patterns start dictating how you think, how you interact with others, and how you make decisions. If you never stop to observe these patterns, you keep repeating them, even when they work against you. That's where tracking comes in. By consistently noticing and writing down your emotional responses, you become aware of the emotional triggers that influence your behavior. That awareness is the first and most important step in developing emotional discipline. Emotional discipline is not about suppressing what you feel. It's about recognizing what you feel, understanding where it comes from, and choosing how you respond to it. Without tracking, your emotions stay vague. You feel overwhelmed, but you don't know why. You get angry, but you can't explain the root cause. You shut down emotionally, but you don't realize it until days later. But when you begin to document what you feel, especially during difficult or stressful moments, you start to notice recurring themes. Maybe you get anxious whenever you're asked to speak in front of a group. Maybe you feel irritated when you're not acknowledged. Maybe you become defensive when someone gives you feedback. These responses don't come out of nowhere. They have a history, a pattern, a reason. And once you start tracking them, you begin to see what used to stay hidden. Tracking emotional patterns doesn't require anything fancy. A simple notebook or digital journal is enough. The key is to do it daily and honestly. At the end of each day, take a few moments to write down how you felt, when you felt it, and what triggered that feeling. If possible, also note how you reacted. Did you speak calmly? Did you raise your voice? Did you shut down? Did you avoid the situation? Over time, this record becomes a mirror. You start to see yourself clearly, not as you imagine you are, but as you really show up in moments that matter. This kind of self-observation builds accountability. You're no longer surprised by your reactions because you've studied them, you've mapped them. You've identified patterns that used to operate in the background. That clarity allows you to make different choices. You begin to pause when you feel a familiar emotion rising. You remember how you usually react and how that reaction serves or sabotages you. And in that pause, you find a new option. That pause is where emotional discipline begins. Patterns reveal more than just behavior. They reveal emotional habits. Maybe you tend to catastrophize when things go wrong, imagining worst-case scenarios. Maybe you suppress sadness because you grew up believing that vulnerability is weakness. Maybe you seek validation from others because you haven't yet learned to give it to yourself. These emotional habits are not random. They were formed through experiences, and they continue to shape your life until you interrupt them. Tracking gives you the information you need to make those interruptions meaningful and lasting. You also begin to realize that emotions are not isolated. They're often linked to deeper beliefs and unresolved experiences. When you track your emotions, you start uncovering the story beneath the feeling. For example, if you regularly feel unappreciated, you might discover it's connected to a deeper belief that your value depends on external recognition. That belief influences how you interpret situations and how you respond to others. Once you see the belief, you can challenge it. You can replace it with something healthier. But none of that is possible unless you first identify the pattern. Emotional discipline is built through repetition. Tracking helps you repeat awareness. Every day that you take a few minutes to reflect, you reinforce a mindset of self-responsibility. You stop blaming circumstances or people for your reactions. You begin to take ownership of your emotional world. That ownership empowers you. Instead of being a passive participant in your emotions, you become an active observer and a deliberate responder. You begin to understand that discipline doesn't mean control over others. It means mastery over yourself. When you have a clear picture of your emotional habits, you can also anticipate challenges. You start recognizing the early signs of emotional escalation. You know when you're starting to spiral into anxiety or shutting down from stress. This early awareness allows you to intervene. You can use breathing techniques, grounding exercises, or supportive thoughts to stabilize yourself. You begin responding from a place of strength, not impulse. This isn't about avoiding emotions, it's about meeting them with clarity and strength. Over time, your self-awareness deepens. You no longer get swept up in every emotional wave. You understand what's happening inside you and why. You don't take everything personally. You stop assuming that every emotional disturbance requires immediate reaction. You develop the ability to hold space for discomfort without needing to fix it right away. That is emotional maturity. It's not the absence of emotion, it's the ability to live with emotion without being ruled by it. Tracking also improves your relationships. When you understand your own emotional patterns, you become more patient with others. You recognize that their reactions might be habits too, shaped by their own unresolved emotions. This understanding helps you avoid unnecessary conflicts and create space for empathy. You communicate more clearly because you've already processed your feelings before expressing them. You make room for dialogue instead of defensiveness, and when disagreements happen, you can return to calm more quickly because you've practiced emotional regulation consistently. Even when life gets unpredictable, your tracking habit becomes a stabilizing force. It keeps you connected to yourself. On good days, it reminds you what supports your emotional well-being. On hard days, it helps you process what happened and move forward without carrying emotional residue. You don't bottle things up or let them fester. You give them space to be seen, understood, and eventually released. This regular cleansing of emotional buildup keeps your mind clear and your heart light. Emotional discipline is not about perfection. You will still get triggered. You will still have moments where emotions get the best of you. But the difference is, you recover faster. You reflect more accurately. You respond more wisely. And you do this not because you were born emotionally disciplined, but because you trained for it. You tracked, you learned, you grew, and now you live with a level of self-awareness and stability that many people never develop. The more you track, the more you trust yourself. You stop fearing your emotions. You welcome them as signals and guides. You develop a kind of internal alignment where your reactions match your values. You stop being a prisoner to emotional habits and become the architect of your emotional world. And from this place of inner structure, you create a life that reflects your highest clarity, not just in how you feel, but in how you live, speak, and connect. Chapter 15. Use quiet time to reset and gain perspective. Most people move through life at a pace that never allows them to catch their breath. They go from task to task, conversation to conversation, without a moment of pause. In that constant motion, it becomes almost impossible to hear your own thoughts clearly. You start reacting to life instead of responding. You get pulled into distractions, noise, and urgency until everything feels important, even when it's not. That's why quiet time is not a luxury. It's a necessity. It gives your mind space to decompress, your emotions room to settle, and your thoughts time to organize themselves without external pressure. When you allow yourself even a few moments of silence, you shift the pace of your day. You remove yourself from the noise that distorts your clarity. The mind naturally begins to slow down when there's no stimulation competing for attention. And in that slowness, something important happens. You begin to feel again, not just surface-level emotions, but the subtle signals your body and mind have been trying to send you all day. You might notice tension in your chest you didn't realize was there. You might become aware of a worry you've been pushing aside, or you might feel a sense of calm that reminds you what's been missing. Quiet time doesn't give you new answers. It reveals what's already inside you but buried under noise. Creating space for quiet resets your nervous system. If you've been on edge, overwhelmed or overstimulated, silence helps you release what you've been holding. It's not about doing anything specific during this time. You don't have to meditate perfectly or journal extensively. What matters is that you disconnect from the outside world long enough to reconnect with yourself. You begin to hear what's real and tune out what's just pressure or performance. You begin to observe your mind without judgment, watching thoughts rise and fall without needing to chase them. Quiet time also gives you perspective. When everything feels urgent, silence reminds you to ask better questions. You stop focusing on what's loud and start focusing on what's true. You gain a wider view of your situation. What seemed overwhelming might suddenly look manageable. What felt confusing might begin to make sense. What appeared urgent might be exposed as unimportant. This shift doesn't happen because you figured everything out. It happens because you gave your mind the room to breathe. Perspective isn't forced, it's revealed when you stop trying to control everything and start listening to yourself with openness. During silence, your inner dialogue becomes more honest. When there's no one around and no performance to uphold, your truth starts speaking. You realize what you're really feeling. Maybe it's disappointment, regret, confusion, or even hope. The point is not to change those emotions, but to understand them. Let them speak. Let them show you what needs your attention. And often, just by allowing them to surface without resistance, they begin to soften. The emotion that felt so heavy during the day loses its grip once you sit with it quietly. Sometimes clarity isn't about solving problems. It's about stepping away long enough to remember what matters. In quiet, you remember your values. You realign with your principles. You realize that not every challenge requires urgency. Not every problem demands action right now. Quiet time helps you separate your internal voice from the external noise. It helps you see which thoughts are yours and which ones were absorbed from someone else's expectations. And once you make that distinction, you begin to act from your own truth, not fear, not pressure, not comparison. The most profound shifts happen in stillness. In a noisy world, stillness becomes a form of power. When others are rushing, you stay grounded. When emotions rise around you, you stay anchored. And this strength isn't loud. It doesn't need to be displayed. It's the kind of inner power that comes from knowing yourself well enough that you don't get thrown off by every wave. But to build that kind of strength, you must make time for quiet. You must let yourself reset, not just physically, but emotionally and mentally too. Resetting through quiet doesn't mean ignoring life. It means returning to it with renewed clarity. You go back to your responsibilities with more focus. You engage with people with more patience. You think more clearly because your thoughts are no longer crowded. You begin to recognize that your greatest breakthroughs rarely come when you're forcing things. They come when you're aligned, balanced, and clear-headed. And clarity is a direct result of silence, not noise. Over time, the more you practice taking quiet breaks, the more you realize how much you've been carrying that doesn't serve you. You begin letting go of emotional clutter, resentment, tension, overstimulation. They all begin to fall away. What's left is a clearer mind, a calmer body, and a more intentional way of living. You stop reacting out of habit and start responding with purpose. And the more you do that, the more in control of your own life you feel. People often think they don't have time to be quiet. But that belief comes from the same urgency that silence is meant to dissolve. Even 5 minutes can shift your entire mindset. Sit alone without a phone, without music, without conversation. Breathe. Watch your thoughts. Let your nervous system decompress. That short pause can reset your entire day. And once you experience the power of that reset, you start protecting your quiet time like it's non-negotiable, because it is. In quiet, you remember who you are. You're not the stress. You're not the to-do list. You're not the noise around you. You are the one observing it all. And when you tap into that still part of yourself, you begin to live from a place of strength that doesn't need constant reassurance. You stop chasing validation. You stop fearing the unknown. You begin trusting that clarity always comes, but only when you create the space for it. This isn't about escaping the world. It's about entering it with clearer vision. Every time you step into silence, you return more present, more balanced, more grounded. And that presence affects everything. Your work, your relationships, your decisions. It influences the energy you bring into a room. It shapes the way others experience you. And most importantly, it transforms how you experience yourself. That is the power of quiet time. Not just as a break from the world, but as a return to yourself. Not just as rest, but as reset. Not just as silence, but as strength. Chapter 16. Speak your needs clearly without guilt or anger. Most people struggle to express what they need. Not because they don't know, but because they're afraid of how others will respond. They hesitate, hold back, soften their truth, or hide it altogether. They fear being seen as difficult. They fear being rejected. They fear losing connection. But the truth is, your needs matter. They are not a burden. They are not selfish, and they are not something to apologize for. Learning to speak your needs clearly without guilt or anger is a key step toward emotional maturity and self-respect. It allows you to live in alignment with who you are instead of twisting yourself to fit into places where you feel invisible or resentful. When you suppress your needs, resentment builds quietly over time. You begin to feel unseen, unheard, or even used, not because others are intentionally harming you, but because they can't respond to needs you haven't shared. People aren't mind readers, and while you may believe that they should just know, the reality is, if you don't speak your truth, it often remains unknown. Suppressing your needs doesn't protect your relationships. It quietly damages them. It turns closeness into distance. It replaces authenticity with performance. It makes connection feel more like sacrifice than support. The first step to changing this is accepting that your needs are valid. They don't require explanation or justification. Wanting time alone, asking for help, needing space, requesting more respect, these are not unreasonable demands. They are boundaries that help relationships thrive instead of break. The problem arises when we believe we have to earn the right to speak up, or when we assume we need to wait until we're frustrated enough to finally say something. But by then, the message often comes out loaded with tension or coated in anger, and the other person doesn't hear our need, they only feel our blame. To speak your needs without guilt, you must stop seeing them as something that takes from others. Needs are not demands. They are not threats. They are invitations for clarity. When you share what you need with calmness and directness, you are creating a foundation for mutual understanding. You are choosing honesty over guesswork. And you're giving the relationship a chance to meet you where you truly are instead of where you pretend to be. This kind of communication is not selfish, it's healthy. It allows you to show up without resentment, and it allows others to respond with truth rather than confusion or assumptions. Many people confuse expressing needs with confrontation. They associate speaking up with conflict. But clarity doesn't require conflict. It requires presence. It requires that you stay grounded in your truth without trying to manipulate the outcome. It means saying, "Here is what matters to me," instead of, "You always disappoint me." It means focusing on your internal experience rather than making someone else the villain. When you shift from blame to clarity, your voice becomes easier to hear. You're not shouting. You're not defending. You're simply sharing what's real for you. Avoiding guilt when you speak up means shifting how you view yourself. If you believe that asking for what you need makes you too much or needy, you'll always hesitate. You'll overthink every word. You'll sugarcoat your truth. But if you start believing that honoring yourself is a strength, you'll begin to speak with more steadiness. You won't rely on emotion to push your message forward. You'll learn to speak with composure, even when the topic is uncomfortable. That calm tone often makes the biggest difference. When you speak from a centered place, people are more likely to listen without defensiveness. You also need to let go of the idea that others must agree with or fulfill your needs for them to be valid. The goal is not control. The goal is clarity. If someone can't meet your need, that doesn't make your request wrong. It just gives you useful information. Maybe the relationship needs to evolve. Maybe expectations need to shift. But at least now you're working with honesty instead of assumptions. Clarity empowers both people to make choices based on what's true instead of what's hidden. Anger often enters the conversation when you've waited too long to express yourself. When you've been holding something in for weeks, months, or even years, the release can come out sharp or explosive. That's why it's so important to speak up early, when the feeling is still manageable, when your voice can still carry calmness, and when your message isn't clouded by pain. The longer you delay, the more emotionally charged your message becomes. And once you explode, the focus often shifts away from your need and onto your anger. The original message gets lost. The person hears your tone more than your words. This is why regular emotional check-ins with yourself matter. You need to ask yourself often, what am I needing right now? What am I avoiding saying? What feels off in this situation? When you check in before things build up, you catch small discomforts before they turn into resentment. You begin to trust your feelings as signals instead of threats, and you give yourself permission to speak with honesty before the emotions become too heavy to hold calmly. You don't need a script. You don't need perfect words. You just need the courage to be real. That means you can say, "I'm feeling overwhelmed and I need some space to recharge," or "It's important to me that we communicate more clearly," or even, "I'm not sure what I need yet, but I know something feels off and I'd like to talk about it." Clarity is not about perfection, it's about presence. It's about being willing to open your mouth and trust that your truth deserves to be heard without apology. One of the biggest shifts happens when you stop fearing how others will respond and start focusing on staying true to yourself. You can't control how someone reacts to your needs, but you can control how you express them. You can choose calm over chaos. You can choose directness over drama. You can choose respect for yourself over fear of rejection. And every time you make that choice, your confidence grows. You begin to believe, not just intellectually but emotionally, that your voice matters. When you live with that kind of internal steadiness, you stop walking on eggshells. You stop over-explaining. You stop seeking approval for things that already feel true in your heart. You begin building relationships based on transparency instead of tension. And that kind of connection, the kind built on real honesty, lasts longer, feels lighter, and supports both people in becoming their best selves. Speaking your needs is not about pushing others away. It's about creating space for truth to exist between you. And the more you practice, the more you realize how freeing it is to stop hiding. You stop bottling things up. You stop resenting the people you care about. You start showing up with clarity, confidence, and calm. And in doing so, you become someone who is not only easier to understand, but also harder to ignore. Chapter 17. Apologize with honesty to repair emotional trust. Most people think apologizing is about saying the words, "I'm sorry," but that's just the surface. A real apology isn't a statement, it's a shift. It's the willingness to face the damage you've caused without minimizing it, explaining it away, or rushing past it. When trust is broken, what heals it isn't silence or avoidance. What begins to heal it is honesty. Sincere, direct, and grounded in responsibility. When you apologize with honesty, you're not just trying to move on. You're choosing to repair what was hurt, not by covering it up, but by standing in the discomfort and showing the other person that they matter more than your pride. An honest apology requires humility. It requires you to look at your words, your actions, and your impact, not from your perspective, but from the experience of the person who was hurt. This can be hard, because it means setting aside the desire to defend yourself. It means not saying "I'm sorry but" or "I didn't mean to." It means not trying to equalize pain by saying "you've hurt me too." All of those things might feel true to you, but they don't belong in the space of an apology. When someone is in pain because of your actions, that space is about them, not about proving you're a good person. The purpose of an apology is not to protect your image. It's to show up fully present for the person who was wounded. That means acknowledging exactly what happened, not in vague terms, but in detail, saying, "I know I dismissed your feelings when you were vulnerable, and that made you feel unseen," carries far more weight than "sorry if I hurt you." One is an acknowledgement of your role and their pain. The other is a statement of avoidance. You can't repair trust by tiptoeing around the truth. You repair it by stepping directly into it with clarity and care. You also have to be willing to accept the consequences of your actions. A true apology doesn't demand immediate forgiveness. It doesn't pressure the other person to get over it. It understands that emotional wounds take time to heal. Even if you apologize sincerely, the other person might need space, time, or even distance. That doesn't mean your apology wasn't meaningful. It means you've given them room to process on their terms. Trust isn't a switch that flips back on. It's something that's slowly rebuilt through consistency, humility, and respect. Often, people say they've apologized, but what they've really done is try to escape discomfort. They say what they think the other person wants to hear so that they can stop feeling bad. But when your apology is about relieving your guilt, not healing their hurt, it's not really an apology, it's a performance. An honest apology isn't rushed. It doesn't come with conditions. It sits in the discomfort long enough for both people to feel seen and heard. It doesn't expect to erase the past. It tries to rebuild something better in the present. One of the most powerful things you can do in a relationship is own your mistakes, not just once, but as a habit. Not just when it's easy, but especially when it's hard. When you apologize without defensiveness, you communicate maturity. You show that the relationship matters more to you than your ego. You create a foundation where truth is welcome and where pain can be spoken out loud without being dismissed. This is how emotional trust is formed, not by being perfect, but by being willing to face imperfection with honesty and care. There's also the reality that some of the most important apologies you'll ever give won't be received. The person may no longer be in your life, or they may not be ready to hear it. But that doesn't mean the apology shouldn't be given. Honesty doesn't need a guaranteed outcome. If you carry regret for something you did, speak it out, even if only in a letter you never send. Apologizing isn't always about being forgiven. Sometimes it's about acknowledging who you were, what you've done, and how deeply you understand the cost of it. That self-awareness creates emotional maturity, and it shapes how you move forward with others. It's also important to understand that apologizing doesn't mean you're weak. In fact, it takes far more strength to say, "I was wrong and I hurt you," than to pretend nothing happened. It takes courage to dismantle the defense mechanisms you've built. It takes strength to prioritize healing over pride. And once you learn how to do that, you become safer to be around. People trust you not because you're perfect, but because they know that when you make a mistake, you'll take responsibility instead of hiding from it. There are people who will test this. People who will apologize without meaning it. People who will use apologies as a tool to avoid change. But that's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about integrity. We're talking about apologies that come with changed behavior. If you say you're sorry but continue the same pattern, your words mean nothing. Real apologies are followed by effort, not promises, not declarations, but small, steady actions that say, "I've listened and I'm doing the work." Apologizing with honesty also means you stop keeping score. You don't say, "I apologized last time, now it's your turn." You don't weaponize your apology to win favor. You apologize because it's the right thing to do, not because you expect a reward. And when someone else apologizes to you, you don't hold it over their head. You don't use it as leverage in future conflicts. Trust is a two-way street, and part of building it is learning to receive apologies with grace, just as much as giving them with sincerity. You're going to hurt people, that's part of being human. Sometimes intentionally, sometimes not, but how you respond when you realize you've caused pain, that's what reveals your character, that's what shapes your relationships. If you can learn to approach those moments with humility, presence, and real accountability, you will become a person others can rely on. You will repair damage instead of compounding it. You will create connections that are rooted in truth rather than pretense. It's not always easy to apologize. Your voice might shake, your chest might feel tight, you might feel exposed. But in that moment, if you can stay grounded in your values instead of your fear, you'll find a strength inside you that's bigger than the discomfort. You'll discover that taking ownership doesn't diminish you. It refines you. It clears space between you and the people you care about. It creates room for something more honest, more respectful, more whole. And that's how trust is restored. Not in one dramatic gesture, but in the quiet courage of truth spoken at the right time. In the right way, with nothing but sincerity behind it. That's what it means to apologize with honesty. That's how healing begins. Chapter 18. Let go of grudges to feel emotionally free. Holding on to a grudge is like carrying a weight you don't need. You may not realize it at first, but over time, it begins to shape your mood, cloud your thinking, and control how you respond to the world around you. You start seeing people through the lens of old hurt. You brace yourself for betrayal, even when no threat is present. The energy that could be used for growth and connection is locked inside cycles of blame and resentment. Letting go of grudges isn't about forgetting what happened or pretending it didn't affect you. It's about choosing not to let pain define your emotional world anymore. When someone wrongs you, it's natural to feel hurt. Anger might feel justified, even necessary, in the beginning. It's your mind's way of saying that something unfair or disrespectful occurred. But when that initial pain hardens into bitterness, and that bitterness becomes part of your identity, the damage continues long after the event has passed. A grudge isn't just a memory, it's a choice to keep reliving the hurt over and over, sometimes for years. And while it may feel like you're protecting yourself, what you're really doing is limiting your peace. Emotional freedom doesn't come from pretending nothing bothers you. It comes from learning how to process pain without letting it control you. Letting go of a grudge begins when you decide that your peace is more important than the past. You acknowledge the pain, you sit with the truth of what happened, and then you choose to stop carrying it as a weapon or a shield. That decision doesn't mean what happened was okay. It means you've decided it won't continue to control your thoughts, your energy, or your future. Many people struggle with this step because they confuse letting go with giving in. They think if they release resentment, they're saying the other person was right or that the hurt didn't matter. But the opposite is true. Letting go is a deeply personal act. It's not about them, it's about you. You release the grudge, not to excuse the behavior, but to free yourself from its grip. You can still hold people accountable, set boundaries, or remove them from your life. Letting go of the emotional burden just means you're no longer allowing the event to replay in your mind as if it's still happening. To release a grudge, you first have to name it. What exactly are you holding on to? Was it betrayal, disrespect, a lack of acknowledgement? Get clear. Vague anger can live forever in your body because it has no clear path out. But when you identify the specific hurt and allow yourself to feel it fully, you open a doorway to healing. This process might stir up discomfort, but that discomfort is the beginning of release. You can't let go of what you haven't fully faced. Suppressing it keeps it alive in the background. Confronting it is what drains its power. Letting go also requires compassion. Not always for the person who hurt you, but for yourself. You have to be gentle with the version of you that experienced the pain. You have to stop judging yourself for being affected by it. Some people carry shame for holding grudges. They feel weak or overly sensitive. But your emotional pain doesn't make you weak. It means you care deeply, and the fact that you want to be free of that pain speaks to your strength. Forgiveness is not passivity. It is a powerful choice that puts you back in control of your emotional life. There will be moments when the anger creeps back in. Something reminds you of the incident, or a person brings it up, and suddenly you feel the same tension and irritation all over again. This is normal. Letting go is not a one-time act. It's a process of returning, again and again, to the decision that your emotional freedom matters more than your resentment. Each time the memory arises, you can choose to feel it without feeding it. You can acknowledge it without holding on to it. With each repetition, its grip loosens. Sometimes the hardest grudges to let go of are the ones we hold against people we still care about, the ones we see regularly, the ones we trusted the most. In these situations, releasing resentment doesn't mean pretending everything is fine. It may mean shifting the relationship, setting stronger boundaries, or changing expectations. But even as you do that, you can release the internal tension. You can decide not to carry that pain in your conversations, in your thoughts, or in your body. You can interact with clarity, not unresolved hurt. There's also a kind of grudge that turns inward. The one we hold against ourselves, things we regret, things we said or didn't say, ways we feel we failed. These are often the hardest to identify because they're so deeply embedded in how we see ourselves. But the same principle applies. Emotional freedom comes from release. You cannot live fully while dragging around the weight of self-condemnation. You can learn from your mistakes without punishing yourself forever. You can hold yourself accountable without denying yourself peace. Releasing a grudge is not about closing your eyes to reality. It's about opening your heart to a different kind of strength. The strength to live without the armor of resentment, to be able to feel joy without guilt, to experience connection without suspicion, to walk through life unburdened by old wars that are no longer being fought. That kind of freedom doesn't come from others. It comes from the decisions you make in the quiet moments when you realize you're tired of being tethered to pain that no longer serves you. People will disappoint you. They'll say things they shouldn't have said. They'll let you down when you needed them most. These things hurt, but the deeper harm comes when you carry that pain for years and let it shape your identity. You are not your worst experience. You are not defined by what they did. You get to choose what comes next. And if you choose peace, if you choose to let go, not to forget, not to excuse, but to move forward, you create a life that is rooted in clarity, not chaos. Letting go of a grudge doesn't mean you forget your boundaries. In fact, it helps you build stronger ones, because when you're no longer emotionally entangled in old wounds, you see situations more clearly. You recognize what's healthy and what's harmful. You stop reacting based on old scripts and start responding with intention. You become less reactive and more grounded. That's what emotional freedom looks like. It's not cold or detached. It's calm, strong, and steady. Your peace of mind is not a luxury. It's not something that can wait. It's the foundation of how you live, how you love, and how you lead yourself forward. And the more you let go of what doesn't serve you, the grudges, the stories, the blame, the more room you have to experience life fully, not guarded, not bitter, but free. And that freedom, once you taste it, becomes something you'll never want to trade again. Chapter 19. Fuel your self-worth by acting with daily integrity. There's a quiet kind of power that builds every time you do what you say you will do. It doesn't announce itself loudly or need approval to exist. It grows in the background, deep inside you, with every choice that aligns with your values. Acting with integrity each day is not about being perfect or moralizing others. It's about keeping yourself rooted in what you believe is right, even when no one's watching. It's a commitment to showing up as someone you can respect when you're alone with your thoughts. Self-worth isn't something you're given. It's something you build from the inside out, and nothing builds it stronger than daily integrity. When your actions match your principles, you gain a sense of inner stability that no compliment, no achievement, no praise from others can match. It becomes your foundation, solid, quiet, and reliable. You don't need to chase validation when you're living in alignment. You don't need to prove anything when your life reflects your own truth. This kind of integrity isn't always about grand gestures. Most often, it's found in small decisions. It's in how you treat people when they can't do anything for you. It's in how you speak when you're frustrated. It's in whether you follow through when the excitement wears off. It's how you handle the little responsibilities no one sees. You begin to notice that every action adds to or takes away from how you see yourself. Each time you choose honesty over convenience, kindness over ego, effort over excuses, you fuel your own self-respect. Living with integrity is about consistency, not perfection. You won't always get it right. But when you fall short, integrity shows up again in how you respond. Do you make excuses, or do you own your behavior? Do you avoid responsibility, or do you step up and correct your course? These moments matter. They shape how trustworthy you feel to yourself. And the more trustworthy you feel, the less you rely on others to tell you who you are. People often try to fix low self-worth by chasing external markers, status, appearance, admiration. But when those things fade or disappear, they're left feeling hollow. That's because self-worth isn't built by how others treat you. It's built by how you treat yourself through your actions. If you want to feel good about who you are, act like someone who deserves your own respect. Live in a way that makes you proud when no one's watching. That's where your strength is born. Daily integrity requires presence. You can't live honestly when you're constantly distracted, chasing the next thing. It calls you to slow down and pay attention to your intentions. Why are you saying yes? Why are you avoiding that conversation? Why are you breaking that promise to yourself again? When you begin to examine your motives with honesty, you give yourself the chance to realign, and with each realignment, you become more centered, more grounded, and more confident. Sometimes integrity means choosing discomfort in the short term to protect your peace in the long term. It might mean turning down an easy opportunity that conflicts with your values. It might mean walking away from people who tempt you to betray yourself. It might mean admitting the truth even when it costs you something. These decisions aren't always easy, but they build a quiet kind of self-respect that becomes unshakable, and over time you realize that your peace is worth more than any shortcut. Acting with integrity isn't about rigid moralism. It's about alignment. It's about living in a way that feels honest to who you are and what you believe. That looks different for everyone. For some, it means being dependable. For others, it means being authentic, vulnerable, courageous. The point is to know what matters most to you and then let your choices reflect that. When your behavior reflects your principles, you become whole. You stop feeling like a stranger to yourself. If you've spent years living out of sync with your values, rebuilding integrity can feel overwhelming, but it doesn't require a complete life overhaul. You begin where you are. Start with one area, your time, your relationships, your health, your work, and ask yourself, what would it look like to act with integrity here? Then follow through, keep showing up, keep adjusting. Every time you do, you reclaim a little more of your confidence. You remember that you can count on yourself, and that memory becomes your fuel. There's a deep emotional cost to living out of alignment. It's not just guilt or shame, it's the slow erosion of your self-trust. You start questioning your own voice. You second-guess your decisions. You begin looking to others to guide you because you no longer believe in your own compass. That's why integrity matters. It's not about being a good person in some abstract sense. It's about staying connected to your own sense of truth. When you live that way, your inner voice gets louder. You stop being lost in self-doubt. And something else happens too. When you act with integrity consistently, you begin attracting people who live the same way. You create relationships rooted in honesty, in mutual respect, in clarity. You stop tolerating manipulation or dishonesty because you're no longer desperate for approval. You're not afraid to walk away from what doesn't align. Your boundaries become clearer. Your standards rise, not because you're rigid, but because you know your worth. Living with daily integrity doesn't mean you'll never disappoint anyone. In fact, sometimes it means exactly that. You will disappoint people when you stop pleasing them at your own expense. You will confuse people when you stop explaining yourself. You will frustrate people when you choose truth over comfort. But every time you choose integrity over appeasement, you reinforce that your life belongs to you. And the more you do that, the less approval you need to feel good about yourself. This isn't something that's built overnight. It's built moment by moment. You wake up and make choices that reflect your values. You follow through when you say you will. You speak honestly, act with care, and take responsibility for your impact. And with every one of those decisions, you add a brick to the foundation of your self-worth. It's not glamorous, it's not always easy, but it's real, and it lasts. You don't need to be flawless to be in integrity. You just need to be honest with yourself first, then with others. You just need to care enough about your own peace to protect it. Every time you act in alignment with your truth, no matter how small the action, you remind yourself that you matter, that your word means something, that you can be trusted, not just by others, but by the person who matters most, you. So don't wait for a perfect moment to start. Start where you are. Choose one thing today, and do it with intention. One honest decision. One kept promise. One moment where you stop pretending and show up fully. Let that be your beginning. And from there, keep going. Integrity is built like anything else, through practice, repetition, and commitment. And the reward isn't just self-respect. It's the calm that comes from knowing that you are living in harmony with yourself. Chapter 20. Commit to growth by practicing emotional habits daily. Growth isn't something that just happens with time. It's something you actively cultivate, day by day, through your emotional habits. If you want to evolve, if you want to become stronger, calmer, more self-aware, more emotionally balanced, you have to treat emotional growth like something worth committing to, not something you get around to when life slows down. The truth is, the quality of your emotional life is shaped by what you practice repeatedly. Not what you say you value, not what you occasionally feel inspired to do, but what you do over and over again when no one is watching. You don't become more emotionally intelligent by accident. You become that way by noticing your triggers, pausing before reacting, staying present with difficult feelings instead of pushing them away. You learn to reflect instead of explode. You learn to listen instead of interrupt. You stop blaming others for how you feel and start paying attention to the thoughts and beliefs that are driving your reactions. That kind of awareness doesn't come from reading a book or watching a video. It comes from building habits that reinforce it every single day. One of the most powerful habits you can develop is emotional honesty, not just with other people, but with yourself. Being honest about what you feel, even when it's uncomfortable, even when it doesn't fit the image you wish you had, is where growth begins. If you avoid certain feelings, they'll control you from underneath. But when you face them, name them, sit with them without running away or numbing out, you take your power back. You start understanding yourself in a deeper way, and that understanding leads to change. Another habit that supports growth is asking yourself the right questions. Not, why is this happening to me? But what can I learn from this? Not, how can I avoid this feeling? But what is this feeling trying to teach me? These are small shifts in thinking, but they open up an entirely different path. One path leads to blame and resentment. The other leads to responsibility and wisdom. And it's the questions you ask yourself every day that shape which path you stay on. You also grow when you practice emotional boundaries. That means knowing where your responsibility ends and someone else's begins. It means protecting your energy without guilt and saying no without explanation. It means understanding that your peace is not something you sacrifice for the comfort of others, but this takes practice. You won't get it right every time. You'll slip. You'll overextend. But if you treat it as a skill, not a personality trait, you give yourself the chance to improve over time. Gratitude is another emotional habit that rewires your internal world. Not fake positivity, not forced optimism, but genuine gratitude for what is real and present, even if it's small. When you make it a habit to notice what's working, to reflect on what you have, instead of always scanning for what's missing, you shift your emotional baseline. You become more resilient. You stop feeling like life is something happening to you and start feeling more connected to it. This doesn't mean ignoring what's painful. It means not letting it consume all your attention. Self-compassion is one of the most vital habits to develop if you're serious about emotional growth. If you can't be kind to yourself when you mess up, you won't take risks, you won't try new things, you'll stay stuck in cycles of self-judgment. But when you make it a daily practice to be gentle with your inner voice, to talk to yourself like someone you love, you create the emotional safety that growth requires. No one grows from being shamed. We grow when we feel safe enough to be honest, to be flawed, to try again. Daily emotional habits are what help you become emotionally fit. Just like physical fitness doesn't happen from one workout, emotional growth doesn't happen from one breakthrough. It's the consistency that matters. Checking in with yourself each morning, asking how you feel and what you need, journaling to process your thoughts, meditating to quiet your mind, reflecting on your day each night, not to judge, but to learn. These aren't dramatic actions, but they compound, and over time, they change how you experience yourself and the world around you. Emotional habits also include the way you speak to others. Do you practice empathy? Do you pause before you respond in anger? Do you own your part in conflict? These things take effort, especially when you're stressed or tired. But if you care about growing, you practice them anyway, not because you owe it to others, but because it shapes who you are becoming. You're not responsible for how people interpret you, but you are responsible for the energy you bring, and the way you show up consistently is what defines your emotional maturity. Committing to emotional growth doesn't mean you'll always feel good. In fact, it often means feeling things more deeply because you're not running from discomfort anymore. You allow the hard moments to come and go without avoiding them. You let yourself cry without shame. You admit when you're hurt without pretending you're fine. And because of that, you move through emotions more freely. You stop holding them in. You stop letting them fester. You heal in real time because you're not bottling up what needs to be felt. One of the most overlooked habits of emotional growth is rest. Not just sleep, but intentional rest for your mind and nervous system. Taking quiet time, unplugging from chaos, creating stillness, because growth doesn't always happen during the doing. It often happens in the space between, in the moments when you pause, breathe, and let your thoughts settle. In that silence, clarity often rises. You begin to hear yourself again, and you remember what actually matters. You also grow by surrounding yourself with people who reflect the kind of emotional maturity you're working toward. That doesn't mean perfect people. It means people who are also practicing awareness, compassion, honesty. People who won't punish you for being human. People who encourage your growth, not your comfort zone. When you spend time with emotionally present people, their habits influence you. And that support can make a huge difference on the days you feel like slipping back into old patterns. No one can do this work for you. You can read all the advice in the world, but if you don't apply it regularly, it won't change anything. Growth is a personal choice. It's a daily decision to show up, to pay attention, to respond differently. It's not glamorous. It's not always visible to others. But it's real. And you feel it in your bones when you're doing it. You feel more aligned, more capable, more grounded. You stop needing permission to be yourself. You stop fearing your own emotions. What you do emotionally every day either builds your resilience or drains it, either expands your capacity or shrinks it, either opens you up or closes you off. You are shaping your inner world with every habit, whether consciously or not. So the invitation is simple but powerful. Practice. Don't wait for a big moment. Don't wait to feel motivated. Just begin. Build your emotional strength like you would build any skill, slowly, steadily, consistently, and trust that with each small act, you are creating the version of yourself you've always wanted to be.